Is 3/12/2026. Phones are open, 505-510-4226. Or if you want to join in via Discord, that's another option. I just released a short video going over one aspect, the most recent iteration of Musk, ever since Musk moved in Trump's orbit. He became this new type of villain. His villain arc was complete. Now he's unleashing right-wing hate, causing societal chaos, etc. But we've seen a number of recent examples, like just within the last couple of years. And I pointed out Lex Luthor in the new Superman is basically a Musk. And I said so because of the rage monkeys that he set loose on the internet. And I went to see if there were any other critics who made that same correlation. And yes, that is absolutely true. Now, in The Madness, in Mountainhead, and in, what was the other one? Naked Gun, where he's the electric vehicle guy. In these other movies, it's the same thing. Why is Musk always portrayed as releasing a mind virus to the world in all of his fictional representations in the last couple of years? But I only focus on these last few because they're so recent and they were all back to back from, the Madness came out in 2024, Superman, Naked Gun, and Mountainhead 2025. So these are recent. And you could try to argue that this is life and the art's just imitating it. But I'm saying no, this is psyop reinforcement. And I say so because these movies were just put into production in the last couple of years. And even though Musk bought X in 2022, he didn't really become fused with government or interfere with the election until 2024, which is what's insinuated in The Madness. Hey, thank you very much, Reality Witness, for supporting the think tank. And by the way, I have a schedule of things I want to happen between now and the summer. A number of things that I want to bring back or things that had lapsed, the PSYOP cards, the tabloid. And so I told you I was going to become a night stalker. I thought I was going to get a job at a deli, but no, the night stalker job starts tomorrow. I went in today for training. It was the easiest money I've ever made. Like, I don't really appreciate how terrible of a boss I am as my own boss, because I am putting a lot of time and effort and energy into things that I know aren't necessarily going to pay off in terms of money, but are nonetheless, valuable investments. And so it's worth my time. But compared to what I normally do, my normal day, that 8-hour shift I just pulled was nothing. It was relaxing. There's even free snacks. I mean, nothing to complain about. The management is basically an app. I don't have to interact with customers. I'm just unloading crates, pallets, stocking shelves. And within about 2 or 3 months, we'll have an office, the PSYOP trading cards. And the PSYOP trading cards are actually one of the most profitable projects that I've been involved in. I just didn't have enough startup capital to really keep it going. But to be honest, when you buy in bulk with these cards, it's pretty much it pays for additional sets, and it's going to spiral forward. And someone suggested another trading card. And I think it was somebody being thrown from a helicopter into a wood chipper. But anyway, I'm going to do the Candace Owens. I'm going to do the Ian Carroll card, snorting red pills, I think. I certainly want to have the Charlie Squibb. And the Charlie Squibb one, I might even do in the style of a Garbage Pail Kid. But more importantly, the Inciter, the tabloid, is going to be resurfacing. And along with that, and once I have it in circulation, we're going to jump into activating the IPR Press Club. So if you've ever held a press pass, You're automatically in. Suzette Ann says, I thought you said Night Stalker. Yeah, I am a Night Stalker. I'll be working from 10 p.m. to 7, stalking the aisles as I stalk products. So I am more or less stalking. I'm a Night Stalker anyway, but at least now I'm doing something constructive with my, not that I'm not constructive, but like I prefer to operate at night, because if you're going to commute to a job during the day, you might as well consider that another hour of labor, maybe even 2 hours, depending on how far you are. Going in late at night, early in the morning gets around that. King Ravana, is there a card 0? No. In fact, we should come up with one. There should be a 0. And we've been talking about Jim Carrey being the fool. Maybe we could go with that. But yeah, 13 to 24 are next in line to be printed, but 25 to 48 are designed, and I'm working on additionals. But again, the main thing is the Insider, the tabloid, for a lot of reasons. And the tabloid's going to be a vehicle for this exact platform, and mind maps and infographics and interviews. Just like before, I mean, these aren't new things. We had several different tabloids, experiments, basically, trial runs, pilots, and they all went well. The problem is you have to reach a certain number of subscribers to be able to consistently produce these things, and then shipping costs are crazy. So there's a little bit of trial and error, but I have it down. It's one of the reasons I was getting back into school, is I wanted to be able to have my journalism degree back as a priority, and really focus on the writing. I had to postpone that in favor of a something that's a little more constructive. I think. I mean, school's fun, it's great, but I think right now what I need is working capital. No, as you said, and I'm stocking groceries, but I call myself a night stalker because I am kind of, nobody's there and the customers aren't there. We're just stocking the aisles, and it's nocturnal. Nobody wants to work that shift for some reason. Like, that's crazy. I mean, my last job before this one was this company called Moore's Transport. It was just basically picking up bodies from funeral homes between here and Farmington and Santa Fe, Espanola, Las Vegas, New Mexico, in the middle of the night and dropping them off at the morgue. There's a little morgue cooler at the old state mental hospital in Las Vegas, New Mexico. And I had to pick up a couple of people who had my last name, and they were just bones. I don't know the story. And I had to drop them off. So I was driving with a bag of bones with my name on it the whole night. But anyway, when I was picking them up, I saw this elevator, and for some reason, I was just staring at it. And this happens sometimes. It's not like I'm blanking out, but sometimes things will draw my attention like magnetically. So I'm like looking at this elevator. It's not really computing. Why am I staring at it? I go in with the attendant, I get the bones, and I leave. When I get back to the morgue, the medical examiner's office, which does all the homicides for the state, when I get back there, the morgue tech was like, "Oh, you went to the old mental asylum," and I was like, "Yeah." He said, "Hey, there's an elevator there that's locked up because some nurse got murdered in there by a patient, and people claim today that they often hear things in it at night, like screaming, and they get these weird phone calls." And I was like, "I don't know, if you believe in ghosts or anything like that, but I thought it was kind of just the whole thing was a little eerie because I don't know why I was staring at it, and then I hear it has this weird, bizarre backstory." Well, when I get home, I start describing this, start talking about it on Discord or something, and this is just strange because you get that like goosebumps, things start moving. That kind of stuff was occurring that night, and you can make of it what you will, but I was just thinking, did I bring something back? And that's not the first time I've had that kind of experience. But no, I was mortuary affairs in the army, which then I was active reserve, and then I moved out of that unit, and I came back, and I just got a job at the morgue, picking up and transporting, which was mostly accidental deaths, and of course murders and stuff. But then I got my embalming license, and I got into just working in the funeral home, and I didn't have to get my hands as dirty. I mean, still dirty, but like I'm not out in the middle of nowhere, and I'm not dealing with the more horrific aspect. I'm more in the putting it back together. Lean Dion says, do they play torturous pop music on the speakers all night? What were they torturing Sam Neill with in The Mouth of Madness? He's in the asylum. They keep playing like the Carpenters, and it's driving him mad. No, yeah, Suzette Ann says Travelers. Okay, so here's something that did the previous one. I was working a 48-hour shift. So basically, I would have the van with me, and I would be on call. And then I would just go to the place, drop it off, go back. It was a great job because it was a 48-hour shift, which meant 16 hours of overtime every paycheck. And some weekends I would pick up 2 or 3. Some it would be like 20, like really busy. And so the idea that I picked up something from the elevator kind of comports with this other thing where I had brought the morgue van home. And I woke up that night, and I don't remember why, but I had one of the backboards like stacked in the corner, and I mean, I had some weirdo like friends back then who would like, hey, can I buy a body bag off you? People are weird like that, really obsessed with this type of stuff. So I think I brought in a backboard just to demonstrate something for someone. I don't know. But that night, the backboard's in the corner of the room. And when I say backboard, it's one of those big plastic things specifically used for carrying corpses for several years. And so I woke up in the middle of the night because I heard my name. And it's dark, but I saw what I thought was a person in the corner. And they appeared to be smiling, but I got the impression they just didn't have any, flesh. And so I just covered myself. I just put my head under the covers and I just ignored it. And then the bed started vibrating weird until I fell asleep. But I didn't want to even, deal with it. I was like tired. I was like, I don't want to deal with the undead right now. But that was when I started to consider that, is it possible that objects can become essentially vessels or somehow attached? Can things become attached to things? I mean, I'm kind of open to it because I don't believe in heaven and hell in the conventional sense. I don't think when you die, you leave necessarily. And I came across a number of interesting books on the subject. For a long time, I was kind of into the subject of necromancy and spiritualism. And of course, one of the books I came across, which has a weird story in it myself. I mean, it was like somebody, a friend, had said that her ex-boyfriend had moved into this like drainage tunnel beneath the highway. So you go into the big ditch, the arroyos, and these tunnels. And this one tunnel, I was told, if I went in there about a quarter mile, a bunch of cockroaches and stuff, nasty place. But in the very back, there's this place where there's like this little this dwelling. And I was told that, hey, he's got a bunch of like weird books you might be into. So I went down there and I got all these books, got this big brass bell. What are those things called? Um, these meditation devices. They're like these decorative things you hold in your hand. I forgot what it's called. But anyway, it was a bunch of weird statues and such. And weirdly enough, a boombox with like a little Kim CD in it. But the guy was obviously on drugs, and she was convinced that he was hexing her in some way. And I think it was her brother, in fact, that asked me to go, or said we should go get his stuff and see if there was anything important. Oh yeah, there's a bunch of I Ching coins, a bunch of incense, like a bunch of weirdo occult stuff. But one of the books there was a book on necromancy, and it was like typed with a typewriter. Like we're talking low budget, self published, and it had this concept of what it called the unnamed and forgotten, and it discussed how you can use an altar and basic, like reading the Psalm 23, I think, white candle, bread, coins. There's a few things that you put together, and the concept is that there are many people who basically die in states where they don't have any coherence, and so they wander around as these like rotting souls, and you can actually attract them and even feed them and in some way use them to do your bidding. Necromancy. That's the whole point. But the whole premise of this book was that the life force itself doesn't extinguish; it just leaves and it just continues on in some form. But that you can in fact interact with the deceased if they choose to hear you. Ouija board type stuff. It kind of minimizes the concept here of incorporeal, sentient consciousness. And some will say, "Oh, it's just demons." Like, I don't know, what's the difference, really? What are we talking about here? Like panpsychism, pantheism, is the entire universe itself in some way just the same thing? It's just consciousness. Like the idea of God is all these sentient beings, so he can experience himself subjectively or experience creation through a myriad of forms. It's an interesting idea. So I'm on this kind of side of the fence where I think death is mostly just a tuning out of this particular part of the spectrum of what we are. Lord Laney says, sounds like Japanese Shinto animism. Discombobulated spirits inhabit inanimate objects. Well, it's not an uncommon belief. And I've seen it in various schools of thought and traditions, idol magic. And in the more recent forms like chaos magic, the thinking is that you can just as easily create something as summon something. That consciousness itself is almost like perception is a force of nature, that your intent and your will is inherently a creative force, and that it directs the manifestation of reality itself to some degree, and you can use that to give form to this essentially discombobulated spirit. But anyway, I found this weird book on necromancy, and I read it back and forth. There's all kinds of interesting ideas in there, but I wonder, where does this stuff come from if people aren't in some way having some kind of legitimate experiences? Do we just chalk it up to superstition? I mean, granted, there are a lot of grifters in this field, but the idea of communing with the dead isn't really as far. It's not that foreign a concept. I mean, I think it's really common, in fact. But the concept of necromancy sounds a little darker, especially because these practices in some areas are associated with gross things like digging up bones, like that guy. There's that new 28 Days Later called Bone Throne. And at the same time, you had the guy, where was he? In Michigan, with hundreds of skeletons in his house. But anyway, yeah, so egregores, that's what we're talking about. That you can basically uh, get a big mob of these incoherent, wandering, lost souls and give them some bit of your focused attention, your loosh. You feed these things libations, offerings, and they become, in a sense, indebted, loyal to you. That's the thinking behind it. But anyway, I read through the rest of the book, and it was like, well, if you want to be able to command the spirits, you have to go through certain rites. And one of them involved, under the full moon, bearing boots, black pants, black shirt, black hat in a graveyard, and then after, I think, 30 days or something, digging it up. And that it's never to see the light of day. It has to always just be brought out at night, has to be covered. And this book also talked about what it called hoodoo, and it described it as a form of magic that had to do with this intersection of matter and spirit, and that you could interact with the in between during certain times, and specifically at crossroads. So the idea of like a crossroads, like a big intersection, especially in the middle of nowhere, has some great significance to this particular school of thought. And it kind of ties into the idea of ley lines, energy currents. But the concept here is that the intersections are places where there are these natural gateways. And by working with certain classes of spirits that you would call mercurial, like Mercury, trickster spirits, at crossroads, you could, if you're willing to, dabble in the stuff, you would be able to get some kind of exchange going on. Maybe you've heard of Robert Johnson. There's like there are formula out there for like how to do this. Like go to the crossroads 9 nights in a row, and on the ninth night, the devil will appear in some form. I mean, these are just folk myths, but what's interesting about the crossroads thing and its connection to mercurial spirits, and Mercury again closest to the sun, is consistently represented in various magical paradigms as the messenger, an intercessor. So this, yeah, I'll give you the name of the book. Um, I'll put it in the description. And I came across this other book, though, unrelated, somewhat related. It's called Jinn Summoning. Again, very poorly written, self-published. A lot of these books that have these like oral traditions, these things aren't really disseminated through Barnes and Nobles, but a lot of these are self-published, and you can tell that the person was sitting at a typewriter. So I found this one called Jinn Summoning, and it was supposedly some underground system of magic from the Middle East, and it involved this concept of two types of jinn, um, disobedient and obedient, kind of like angels and fallen angels. The ones who are obedient to Allah's plan versus the ones who are disobedient, and the disobedient ones can be summoned if you go to the wilderness, specifically at a crossroads. So I thought that's interesting, another crossroads thing. And the book said you need to have a red, white, and black candle, 3 candles, red, white, and black. You go to the crossroads, and it had this incantation, mostly, I guess, verses, and you're supposed to burn some hair with matches. So sulfur, the hair, there's certain scents that attract these spirits. And it specifically says that they are tricksters. And this is an interesting parallel to the Americanized tradition that is like it's a fusion of like American and Afro-Caribbean magic. But the crossroads thing in America, in these books that I found from here, also involve 3 candles, red, white, black, and crossroads to summon the trickster. So I thought, jinn summoning, this Middle Eastern underground folk magic, probably forbidden, and American hoodoo, crossroads magic, have these very similar approaches, like down to the planetary association, the colors, the numbers, and the warning about the nature of what you're working with, the trickster. Yeah, burnt hair is the worst smell. I agree. Well, again, the book is called Jinn Summoning. I found it like on Amazon or something, but it was way overpriced. It wasn't the best in terms of the quality, but it just seemed like it came from somebody who was legitimately connected to it, and they weren't. Maybe English wasn't the first language, but I was. I when I jokingly say I'm an alien anthropologist and I'm just studying belief systems and how they interact, it's not really a complete joke. Like I've always been like legitimately interested in different schools of thought when it comes to these matters, because I think that if there's truth to it, it's going to be revealed in the common frameworks. And there are common frameworks, which is what makes me think there has to be some legitimacy to it. But getting back to the idea of necromancy and servitors, egregores, and the concept of being a creator of some kind of entity, that has a very strong parallel to the concept of AI agents. The other night, I was perusing a book on King Solomon's magic and the goetic spirits. And again, these things are all pretty much the same. But the trickster element is what I find most interesting. Like, what is with that? But if you're interested in these books, yeah, I was actually thinking about doing a series of book reviews, maybe even just live going through them, because I have a storage unit I was going through, which is full of a lot of books. And unfortunately, a lot of my best books actually burnt in a very weird fire. I lost a lot of great books. However, I've amassed quite an interesting array. And recently, I've been looking very closely at um, chaos magic, Osman Osper, the idea of sigil magic, because I think what we're seeing when it comes to psyops are clear examples of esoteric rituals, ceremonies, and also it has all the trappings of magic. And the other night I was talking about how when you go into a movie theater, you're entering a black cube and you're facing the monolith, the big screen, which is the Overton window. And you're subconsciously absorbing so much content, extraneous, peripheral images and archetypes that you may not even recognize at the level of, just a ticket buyer enjoying a movie, eating popcorn. But nonetheless, it's becoming part of you. It's merging with your mind. It's like when you watch movies, do you really think that your memories are memorizing it as fiction? Or are these vicarious experiences being processed along with real memories in the same places? Like, I tend to think that we are easily confused, just being what we are. Look at one of the oldest arts out there is magic. And I'm talking about like magic tricks, illusion. So we're so easy to fool. We easily get merged with imagination, delusion, fakery. And it just seems like every time you watch a movie on some level, you're taking part in some kind of indulgence in hypnosis where you're allowing yourself to be hacked. Not that I'm against this stuff, but we know from our observations that, and I think this is worse than subliminal, we know that entertainment works hand in glove with the psychological warfare ops, that movies are influence operations. Daniel says, do you have an explanation for the Mandela effect? Yeah, it is a memory error. I have a perfect explanation for it. The Mandela effect is caused by the person asking you the question. If it was real, it wouldn't be a simple binary. It wouldn't be version A, version B. There'd be multiple spin-offs, but there aren't. And the memories are shallow. No Mandela effect can stand up to any kind of scrutiny. None of them. I've been through all of them. You could try me. But my point of it is, when the person asks you, do you remember Kit Kat with or without the hyphen? When they ask you, they're actually prompting your imagination to create the one that they brought up. So now you have authentic memories of Kit Kat with no hyphen. But when they ask the question, sort of like prompting Midjourney, your imagination creates the image in your head of Kit Kat with a hyphen. And so that, in that context, gets, when you're gaslit because they're getting you to doubt your perceptions, like, do I know this? Do I remember this or don't I? If they can get you to question your own recollections, then these two propositions are equal in your mind. So now it's just a question of, are you going to accept the premise? So it's called the misinformation effect. The misinformation effect is like standard operating procedure today, but basically the way it works is when you recall something, it's influenced by the context in which it is recalled. And that context can actually influence it or even replace it. So every time somebody asks you a Mandela effect question, they're making you recall a memory and they're contaminating it. They are using the misinformation effect at you And they may not even know it. In fact, none of them know they're doing this. So they are creating the perception that there was a discrepancy. They're creating that false perception of a discrepancy when there is none. There was no discrepancy in the first place. So it's one, it's the misinformation effect. Two, it's retroactive interference. Three, it's interrogator bias, which is why so many people get wrongly convicted based on faulty eyewitness testimony, only to be later exonerated when lawyers examine the interrogation and they find, well, these interrogators created this response. It's not a foreign concept. It's not like a conspiracy theory. Like, this idea of interrogator bias is very well understood. So the Mandela effect actually plays on that deliberately. Well, not intentionally. I don't think all Mandela effect pushers are wittingly part of this conspiracy, but I think this was a direct attack on the cognition of conspiracy theorists. And there are other factors as well that have to do with groups, belonging to a group. But I think it's actually nefarious, because the same people who fell for the Mandela effect are the people who are calling out news being faked, fake events. Well, you can't say anything's fake on the news if you're now saying that reality's fake. So it's very much, I think, an attack on eyewitnesses, on objectivity itself. And they can get people to think that reality is shifting. But I went through all of these with a fine-tooth comb. None of them are legit. There's one purveyor of Mandela effects who would say, everybody knows Timmy fell down the well. And I was like, how did they get him out? Nobody knew. So how could everybody know that he fell down the well, but nobody knows how he got out? If he fell down, he got out, unless it was the last episode. So how can they claim to remember it? So when people say they remember and they're referring to a Mandela effect, it's important to note that they're not lying. They're telling their truth, their subjective opinion. But the problem is, what they're identifying as a memory is actually something that was prompted when they considered the Mandela effect. And again, every single Mandela effect is a binary. If reality is shifting, there'd be multiple versions of these things, not just either or. But the mind game, the gaslighting, misinformation effect doesn't work if you have multiple options like that. Now, there were some people who were super into the Mandela effect because they thought that it was going to help them, like, looks max and ascend and make their dreams come true, because they thought that this was leading them out of a world of suffering and that they were changing bodily, that they were escaping the matrix, and that the more people who would see these things, the bigger the breakaway parallel universe they would constitute, and that they would break away from all of us, the NPCs who can't see these things. That's how it became something of a religion. So I came out here and I debunked these things, and they got mad at me. They wanted to stone me, but basically, it kind of fell apart. The Mandela effect cults aren't really there anymore. And a couple of the top priests of the Mandela effect called me the God blocker because they thought they found a path to God, and here I am ruining it. I also killed the simulation God. So that's two. Ms. Al says, sometimes I think people ask about topics you covered extensively, like MB, to get you off the esoteric stuff. Possibly. Well, the esoteric stuff is very popular these days, and these ideas aren't even suppressed. So I'm just kind of curious to see where it all goes. I kind of think a lot of it's misplaced. Like, I think when we talk about, like, precognition, I don't think that belongs in parapsychology. I think these things are better approached as parts of the mind we haven't mapped out yet. I'm really not into this idea that we need to mystify everything we can't understand. Mystification is a dead end. The instant you declare it's mystical, what you're actually saying is, this is beyond our ability to understand. We can never know. Man couldn't do this. And people said that for a long time. There's no way man could do predictive programming. Do you realize that was like a common viewpoint in this side of the internet? Hey guys, look, these movies are consistently lining up with fake events. Man couldn't do that. Like, what do you mean? Like, what the hell is that even supposed to mean? That the man, humans, that propaganda run by governments isn't capable of coordinating psyops with the movies when these psyops are always coordinated with drills and agendas? If they can have an agenda ready to launch on the heels of a successful psyop, then clearly there's some coordination here. And this is what they're missing, is that we can now look at entertainment as a subset of government, bread and circuses. But instead of recognizing bread and circuses and understanding the architecture of this thing, instead of looking at how the Truman Show is made, how it works, how we fell for it, how you escape it, instead of looking at the architecture of the internalized Truman Show simulation they put us in, people get lost with these far off explanations. Like Nick Hinton, this big Twitter channel last night, said, yeah, predictive programming means that artificial intelligence with quantum computers already exists because we already hit the singularity, and it goes back in time and it retroactively creates things. Okay, take out your Occam's razor. What's more likely? Time traveling computer programs or time traveling AI, or that there's some level of coordination where the government is surreptitiously using movies as a propaganda vector? Now, I would say that that's something they would want to cover up, because we can move past who's doing this. Is it the Jesuits? Is it the reptilians? Is it the Jays? We can move past that crap, and we can say, well, we can point out that these particular psyops have the direct involvement of these directors. Different platforms, but if you look at it from a decompartmentalized point of view, we can point out names of people who are directly or 1 degree separated from psychological operations, influence operations, hoaxes. Every single astronaut out there, that they all fit in this category. And I rarely talk about the space program and how fake it is. I talk about its esoteric underpinnings at times, but I've left it alone on purpose. But we're not leaving it alone. Like, no, we are not done. Not even close. I was happy to see Greg. Is it Greg Carlson? What's the guy's name from Higher Side Chats? The Higher Side Chats interviewed somebody, and they were talking about how the greatest thing ever made by mankind, the orbiting cathedral, the space station. There's no video of it being made. Ollie Goering says IPS sabotage Stavely from ascending to Giga Chad. Rip. Pretty much. They were like, my liver moved. There's more holes in my head. My heart moved. And one of my favorite ones was South America used to be directly below North America, and now it moved. And it moved on all the maps. That was one of my favorite ones, because when you look at like cartoons and children's programming or the game Risk, you have this simplified version of everything. And you can tell that a lot of people's formative memories were when they were like 5. And then they see the real thing and they feel like it's a discrepancy. And it's like, no, it's not a discrepancy. But the world's a little more complex than you might remember if you haven't been getting the updates. So we're seeing a lot of, just, I think, cognitive dissonance that's being deliberately induced as a consequence of the gaslighting questions. Do you remember A or B? Because if they can get you to doubt yourself, they put you into a very suggestive state. And one of the other selling points for the Mandela effect is that if you see it, you have evidence of transcendence. You have entered a parallel universe. You proved we're in a simulation. So you could actually consider this to be miracles. These are miracles. If you see something in reality change, shift, and other people see it, but the masses don't, yeah, you are in on a miracle. And miracles are generally just psyops, and it's how religions, get people to believe, and then other people will have secondhand belief on that. But the miracle industry is not new. And the Mandela effect is essentially miracles for simulationists. And I don't think it's a coincidence that the conspiracy theorist crowd is immersed in this mystification of AI simulation and, of course, things like Mandela effects. It seems to be a deliberately constructed alternative to traditional religion, kind of like science fiction merged with New Age. And that's one of the common things we talk about here is the syncretic blend of science fiction and older uh, religious paradigms and how they reintroduce things. Like last night, we were talking about Luke Skywalker versus Darth Vader and how it's Sun versus Saturn, John Connor versus the Terminator. Same thing. And as we get deeper into these breakdowns, like we're going through all these Gnostic allegories and movies, we'll do the Sun versus Saturn thing, and you'll see how prevalent that is. Another one that I like a lot is the Alice in Wonderland archetype, how it's insert like see you got like Dorothy in the Wizard of Oz. And I think that this is in fact Persephone going to Hades. So the Wizard of Oz is like Hades, Dorothy's Persephone, Alice, Persephone, the Mad Hatter, Hades. We have this like recurring theme, and I've noticed that this is something that seems to signify something about mind control and where we are, collectively. Like we are in Wonderland, Oz, Westworld. But I picked up on a number of these archetypes that are just rampant. But my main focus right now still is the breakdown of the world stage characters and showing how there are common denominators within predictive programming that we need to look at. And this isn't true just for the people, just for the characters. It's also true for the places. Like how many times have we seen Seattle associated with the number 311, 11-3, and or the Kraken and EMPs, nukes. And when we look at 9/11, how many times did we see it get hit by planes before it actually happened? Because they were taking it down for decades. They were preparing us for it. On the lead up to the Butler, Pennsylvania shooting at Trump, there were, off the top of my head, I could name 7 or 8 movies. And I haven't even, in fact, the other night I talked about these. I missed one. Batman Caped Crusader, the cartoon where Rupert Thorne, at the end of the season, Batman turns around and throws a bladed boomerang at him and cuts his right ear. I also forgot to mention Tony Soprano getting shot in the ear at the end of season 1. And that ties into the whole mob boss, a bad Don. But I didn't go through all of them the other night when I was going through the different Donald Trump correlations. How every time you see Donald Trump, it's either A, 9/11, or B, a headshot, or both. Donnie Darko's got both. Megalopolis has both. But what we're showing here is that these aren't coincidences in the sense of being random, but these are engineered coincidences. And they're character building for the main stars of their psychological operations. It's like they step out of the movie screen. So they exist in your head. And so earlier I was talking about, does your mind process fiction and reality differently in terms of its memory? Like your memory banks. Like, do you have a separate memory for stuff you saw in movies and then stuff you lived through? Or is it all put into the same place? Because what I'm wondering here is, are they creating mind viruses, or like, so in Richard Brody's book Virus of the Mind, he talks about how you have these accretions of ideas that lump together over time and essentially become beliefs that you acquired without volition. That's why he called them mind viruses, but they mutate. And so, in other words, like memetics is his whole thing, like using genetics and genetic engineering as an analogy to describe how you can engineer memes or meme plexes. So if you're a memetic engineer, you could plant memes through characters, through movies, through entertainment into people's heads and create these character templates or these memories, I say in quotes, these false memories of people who will be introduced to them on the news. And they will react according to their bias. Because from this perspective, having looked at numerous examples of Trump in fiction, we were set up for him. We were prepared to look at Trump in his final form as this authoritarian right winger demagogue. Like, this was encoded into his character decades ago, long before he even seriously got into politics, before he got into the whole Tea Party birther movement. They had already created this construct. Musk, 1952, Mars Technical Tale, the Elon who colonizes Mars. That script was already there. They're already creating these roles. And then they have actors who assume these roles. And the reason why this is worth doing and talking about is because what we're trying to create here is or trying to point out here is that the theater of Psywar is basically stagecraft. It's not clones. It's not simulation or AI or CGI. No, there are people out there who are just sowing confusion. They're like, Jim Carrey never existed. There's no such thing as Jeffrey Epstein. I'm like, okay, you know what? This sounds to me like an active measure so people don't get a grasp on what we're really looking at here, which are fake people, fake events, and a manufactured history that is experienced collectively as essentially an alternate reality game. Our involvement in it makes it real. We all acquiesce to the basic premise of every fake event. And before you know it, we have a shared history that has all these things that didn't actually happen. But it's really impossible to see it, from the Normieville perspective. And you certainly can't see it from Trutherville because they're too invested in the belief in these things. Like, the bloody guardrail holds people behind. If you think they kill people in psyops, you haven't figured this thing out. And you have no evidence. In our Discord server, we had people in there for years who seemed like their only task was to refute me on that point. They'd be like, people do die in psyops. You don't know. Oh, you think they wouldn't kill people? You know how long I had to push back against that one? And I noticed this. Like, I take note of the ideas that get pushed back. And I notice, and I'm not saying these people are agents or plants or misinformation operatives. I just think that a lot of people adhere to truth or orthodoxies they never challenged. And they defend these things. And what I've been trying to point out here is that if you defend alt media, you are defending the establishment media's duopoly. You're part of the program. You're what they would call a useful stooge. What I call a propaganda mule. And I'm not a propaganda mule. I'm not trying to reinforce their big lies because I get clicks. But it's a very sophisticated game. It's a sublimated civil war. Every single psyop that comes down the timeline is perfectly split down the middle in terms of how it's going to be interpreted by the left and the right. They will both agree it happened. One will say the other did it, vice versa. They blame each other for it. And the trick here is that they both agree it happened, whatever it is. And that's where they're wrong. You have the mainstream and the alternative interpretation of an event that didn't actually happen. I mean, how long ago was Charlie Kirk? And people are still talking about it like it happened. Like, they live in a parallel universe. I don't live in their universe. I don't live in the universe where Charlie Kirk is dead. I'm a realist. And I see these people who are caught up in these delusions, and they're in love with the delusions. They're in love with these myths that have been manufactured for them. And again, the reason why everything is so triggering and everything triggers this left right sublimated civil war is because the public has been or is being triangulated against itself. That's how this thing works. There's never going to be a point of agreement that creates some big kumbaya and everybody unites. The points of agreement will always be attended by mutual blame shifting. I mean, they will blame the other side for something that never happened. But the compartments in this thing can be very well, I think, understood if you just look at the political horseshoe model and superimpose over it triangulation, and then make a list on the left and the right of their major platforms and positions, and you'll see that everything is a mirror of the other side. Woke left, woke right. So that's why I said that red pill, red pill is essentially woke. It's a woke movement. It's a mirror of the left. But what's worse is that it's entirely inside of the far right politics. It's like part of right. It's part of right wing politics. So you can't really get off world stage if you're still putting your faith in politicians, because your politicians are one of two things: 100% fooled, insulated, or too dumb to notice, or they're in on it. So who do you want to follow? A fool, a sheep surrounded by wolves in sheep's clothing, or a, a literal wolf? Like, that's your choice. But I've got serious Charlie Kirk fatigue. I stopped caring about that a long time ago. But its relevance is simply in that it is one of the best examples that we have of concurrent predictive programming, with the added bonus of the main or the secondary character is still participating in world stage events, and we can see her walking in the footsteps of her corresponding fictional characters. I referenced Walter Lippmann last week, a couple weeks ago, because he talked about this idea of there being a sublimated civil war, and this is what his thinking was: that by doing an event, a manufactured event, they could get a gauge on what percentage of the public thinks what about any given issue. So, case in point, the CK shooting, you were able to, ascertain, how far is one side going to go to respond, to retaliate? Like, is there a political will for some kind of civil war to actually happen or pop off, or something along those lines? So, it's a way to gauge public opinion. But according to Walter Lippmann, when you could find out what 51% of the population wanted, you could just give it to them without breaking anything, without anybody having to die, without spilling blood. You could peacefully let the mob get its way and make it think it had a victory, when in fact you're just essentially guiding the mob in the least destructive way possible. And so he saw this as a way of replacing democracy with might makes right, with force, and he called it a civil war, but it's sublimated because it happens in the mind. But the reasoning here is, I think, pretty sound. Like, if you know this much of the population is willing to do this, just give it its way. So it's like pacification is what we're seeing. It's like government by pacifying the mob. Now, I don't know if that's how it really works. I mean, that was his thinking on it. I'm more in line with the idea of superstition, maintaining the cohesion of the state. And there's no doubt we've entered into a very superstitious age. There's no checks on it. There's no pushback. I mean, there's no pushback against these outrageous claims that have become normalized. QAnon is mainstream. They just got rid of the Q part. Frazzle drip is mainstream. Normieville stuff. Normies are mad about it. I mean, I heard it myself in class. I heard them talking about, yeah, because Epstein. Like they all just take it for granted that it's real because they saw it on TV. They just shrug, like, yep, the elite people are just a bunch of child trafficking cannibals worshiping Satan. Yep. And that has no consequence. They just say it. It makes them a little more cynical, perhaps demoralized, but nobody does anything about it anyway. So what does it even mean? I mean, there was a war, I think, something with Iran, but everybody got distracted by Jim Carrey's Botox. Like nothing is more relevant than anything else in the mind of the brainwashees. Like I'm convinced that everything is so tabloid and engagement bait and rage bait has pretty much replaced any serious discourse. But what I'm looking at here is the thinking process. Like what we're looking at here is that the public has been taught to consume media in a certain way, and there are certain frameworks you have. And the mainstream and conspiracy theory frameworks are different, but they have the same starting point. But what defines them is passivity and credulity, which is the opposite of what I would consider to be active skepticism. And that fundamental difference is what separates what we are doing, what our analysis is, from mainstream and alternative, which are essentially a duopoly. And by credulity, I mean they automatically believe their side, but they automatically reject the other side. And I'm not the only one who's pointed this out, and I think it's problematic that people are very quick to believe things that go along with their preconceived notions. It's like auto believers, but they're alternative auto believers. And they have so many beliefs they've been given. And the whole conspiracy theory subculture is always chasing the latest thing. It's all novelty oriented. And so there's this complex of just all these different beliefs. It's a form of entertainment more than anything. And they don't want to lose it. A lot of people don't want to let it go because it's escape. They need the escapism. And what are they escaping from? They're escaping from a lot of stuff they think is real, I guess. But what I'm noting here is that this escapism is one of the biggest hindrances to people seeing through it. And so, in all likelihood, this is government created mythology in order to discredit people and misdirect them, as we've seen with the ufology. One great example of this is mud flood. The whole mud flood concept has a lot of these people who are naturally curious, non mainstream, questioning history, getting lost in science fiction and fantasy while ignoring recent fake history, proactively manufactured history. They miss that. They got their heads in the mud. We're not talking about retconning, revisionism, or burning records and replacing them. We're talking about proactively creating history every single day. A worldview monopoly that's been successfully run on a global scale for as far back as I can detect. To me, that's more immediate than hypothetical scenarios about what might have happened 300 years ago and what cathedrals were really for free energy. And again, it's science fiction. It's more entertainment, but it's not really fact based. And what we're doing is fact based analysis. I'm providing receipts. And the value in the Great Deconstruction Project is that we can feed this data through AI and extrapolate stuff from it. In other words, we can show the internal consistency of what we're looking at, what I term systemic fakery. And the people who don't recognize that systemic fakery is a big deal are mostly truthers who are of the opinion that, oh, it's obvious everything's fake. No, it's not obvious. And we're not saying everything's fake. And the thing they're missing is the timeline. By being focused on the now and chasing clicks, I think a lot of them don't have their frame of reference, inclusive of 6+ decades of this sustained psychological warfare. They're too focused on the now. Remember back in like November, someone's like, "Can we move on from Charlie Kirk?" Like, no, if you're chasing shiny objects, if you need a hit, go to Q Street, go to Alex Jonestown and drink some more Kool-Aid. Go find a propaganda mule to hand you some red pills, because we're not junkies looking for doses of infotainment here. We are engaging in a deconstruction. This is basically a philosophical discussion, but we're deconstructing the internalized simulation that the masses have all unwittingly acquiesced to. A simulation that requires them to be passive recipients of mind viruses, which is why I often say the government gave the public maids. Yeah, there's been a pandemic long before COVID, the mind AIDS pandemic. Non-functioning mental immune systems 100% susceptible to every single passing mind virus. And they're not curing mind viruses. They're not trying to educate the public to be better at processing media. They're not trying to say, hey, you need to update your operating system. No, they want a credulous public. They don't want skeptics, because they want the public to be programmable. What they want to do is censor those of us, or ignore those of us who are pointing this out, that they need you to be compliant and passive and moldable and gullible. And people need to also get that skepticism should also include your own presuppositions. You have to be skeptical about the things you profess to be true. There's this like selectivity of being skeptical of the other side, but non-skeptical of one's own side. So what we're doing here is we're kind of raising the standard of evidence, and we're being a lot more responsible about qualifying our claims. And we've replaced the concept of low information belief or low information disbelief with informed disbelief, which is far more um, reliable, because we're not trusting anybody. I'm not trusting a blue check. And when you consider the long term view, as in 6+ decades of this stuff, you can pretty much start to, essentially give the media no benefit of the doubt. It's not like tomorrow they're going to be honest and truthful. It wouldn't matter if they were, because their entire perspective rests upon an edifice of lies. And that's what we're attacking. We're actually going after the edifice of lies. And when you separate the lies from reality, you can see, okay, this is the program and this is objectivity. And I'm rejecting the program. But to be deprogrammed does require the active rejection of it. You have to be able to actually see it. If you can't define it, then you can't really convince me that you're deprogrammed, and your opinions will reflect that anyway and give it away. That's why someone with a huge channel like Nick Hinton can say, the reason why there's predictive programming is because quantum computers have reached a singularity and the AI is time traveling and retrocausality. I'm like, okay, that's not the answer. Get your Occam's razor out. Jim Carrey's not a clone. And we didn't reach a singularity where AI is manufacturing coincidences with the news and the entertainment. Arthur C. Clarke made that law about any sufficiently developed technology is indistinguishable from magic. And for some reason, a lot of people will see something that they can't explain and they'll reach for the most magical, unlikely explanation for it. Like, maybe what we're offering here, what we discuss, is like a spoiler, like a buzzkill, and it kind of is. If you're a media junkie, because media is a drug, and if you've been hitting conspiracy theories pretty hard for a few years now, and I'm here saying these things are worthless, you're an info junkie. You're just getting hits of these titillating notions, fear porn, etc., and it's no closer to the truth than mainstream. They don't want to hear that, especially if they are self-righteous enough to think that they are the arbiters of truth and they're fighting against the bad guys, that they are a just cause. And a lot of them feel that way. They're like, well, we're saving the children. We're fighting the deep state. And they get into this simplistic us versus them culty mentality. One of them told me, not me, because they don't directly confront you if they're trying to do a character assassination. They'll talk to your crowd and they'll say, this guy thinks that you should get vaxxed. I'm like, no, I specifically say I'm not pro and I'm not anti on any of these things because I'm not in their mind war. I'm not anti Pepsi. I just don't drink it. I'm a non Pepsi drinker. I'm not against it. But if you automatically categorize people who aren't on your side as the enemy, you're in their system. You're on one or the other side of their bifurcation, the schism. And it is a schism, and it is that simple. There's no middle ground. Some people who are half-assed paying attention, who play both sides or pretend like they're neutral and impartial, yeah, they're basically just deceiving themselves. There is no middle ground on the world stage. You're either on one side or the other. There's a chasm between the two. The idea of middle ground is kind of a hoax because simply by accepting its presuppositions, you are a participant in the Psy war. It's sort of like in the village. We talked about the elders dress up as monsters and keep the village scared so they never leave. Well, as long as you're taking a side, you're part of that structure. So you're not neutral. You're a participant in the Psy war. You're not anti war if you're part of the world stage, which is engaged in World War infinity. It never really ends. So, like, we're not a middle position. I don't claim neutrality. My point of view is just outside of their duopoly. And am I opposed to it? Well, I have it's sort of like my relationship with religion. I'm just like, okay, I'm not into this worldview. I can see how it's been imposed and how it's likely there to hijack my life, control my mind, and extract money and loot. So no thanks. I'm a refusenik. I'm a psyop refusenik. I am not participating. Unless they give me a stimmy check, then I'll play along. But detachment is real. And the detachment from the world stage, from the theater of Psywar, from the bread and circuses, the detachment comes from rejecting its face value claims. So you're not emotionally manipulated. So I consider myself a conscientious objector more than anything, an inactivist. So when someone tries to put me in their binary, you're either on my side or you're one of them, I'm like, no, you're one of them because the pro anti are part of the same team. You're being triangulated against one another, so you don't see this. So you're a controlled opposition. The person who is opposed to me because I'm not anti whatever they're anti, yeah, I'm anti them. I'm anti anti. I actually have a book out called Anti Anti. It's a little ebook about how you must not only reject reflexively, like they do, the mainstream, but you have to also reject the alternative. You can't fall into this trap. You got to be anti pro and anti anti. The non position. Non is valid. Non is the only sensible position because any anti, like even if you're against something in principle, to join their anti group to join that groupthink is to align yourself with the world stage itself. You're now in the political horseshoe. You're now in the mud. Was it George Bernard Shaw? Never wrestle with a pig because you both get muddy and the pig likes it. Like, I'm not in their pig pen. Lean Dion says truthers don't want the more ordinary or mundane answers. They don't. I encountered this with one simulation theorist who refused to entertain the notion that man could be manipulating man on this scale. She wanted to insist that this is being done by a simulation, or that the simulation programmed them to do it. But she wouldn't accept the notion, and maybe it's because nobody wants to admit that they have been under a spell, that they were conquered, that the mind war won. They were mind war casualties. But I don't think there's any shame in it necessarily. We were born into this with no options. And there are no skeptical platforms that are skeptical of both sides equally. We don't exist in their world. That's why we don't get censored. In fact, that's one of our greatest advantages, is that they will not censor us. They will censor anti-vaxxers, they'll censor conspiracy theorists left and right. They'll censor anybody associated with like far right politics. They have ways of censoring people, but these people are part of their paradigm. And by censoring them, they're demonstrating the triangulation. They're showing, oh, the state rejects this one and loves this side. That's part of the system. So if they're being censored, it's actually for show. It's performative. Because what are they even being censored for? Nothing they're saying is true. And Alex Jones, that was all performative. Did he really go down fighting for the truth? No, in the end, he capitulated and he denied calling things fake. And that was just to make it seem like to go that route is to risk getting sued, to put, a chilling effect. But about them not wanting more mundane answers, it's true. And I don't think I don't think it's a serious thing. I don't think they're serious. Like, are you a serious thinker if you're staring in the face of an encroaching dark age, like say the Reformation? We're talking about the concept of movable type press, liberation of knowledge from knowledge filters, monopolies, the masses being able to uh, get information that previously would have been bottlenecked to those with privilege and money, etc. Like, the Bible being translated into the Vulgate, so that commoner could possibly read it. That was frowned upon. So the idea here is that you have this notion of a enlightenment following this pervasive culture of ignorance and superstition that made people controllable. And now I see how the internet and its guardrails and the monopoly that controls it has put us in the same position of there being a massive ignorant people and then a smaller group who have more information, insiders. And the difference is what they know. And with media becoming what it is, merging with AI, the ability to fake things is now perfect. Everything can be simulated and faked 100% convincingly. So you can no longer see through the lies. So now we can't process lies if we're just going off what they show us. So in a way, it's like we've been rendered illiterate. And they have to read to us. They have to interpret things because we can no longer see for ourselves. We cannot perceive for ourselves. We have to outsource it now. And that's the position that people have been put in. And I'm suggesting that this definitely goes along with the Overton window opening to allow aliens and demons and exorcisms and all these things into mainstream thought alongside the QAnon level stuff. So they're mainstreaming superstition as our ability to discern real and fake has been removed. And I think this might be to further remove us from objective reality for the purposes of controlling us, because ignorant, superstitious people are easy to control. Like, and like, so the madness. I was talking about the madness earlier. Like, are we being driven mad by this? Is this a collective insanity? Like, have we entered into this place where the masses have been essentially put into a Truman Show, but it's regressed to the point where it's just utterly subjective and anything goes. There's no standards. It's really bad in that sense. I think it's like again, it's like we're entering into a new dark age, but I think it's by design. And then, like I said the other day, I was talking about Frank Herbert from Dune Messiah, and he said they're not mad. They're trained to believe, not to know. So he makes that important distinction between believing and knowing. That the people aren't really crazy. They're trained to be believers, not to be knowers. And he said because knowledge is dangerous, belief can be manipulated. Again, that's Frank Herbert, Dune Messiah. It explains the situation that we're in. When I said that the public has maids, that's what I mean. When I say the government gave the public mind aids, I mean they were trained to be passive recipients of mind viruses, to be believers, not to be knowers. To be a knower, to be a skeptic means that you're exercising your critical faculties. You're actively processing the information that you're getting. You're not passively receiving it. And as such, you are a knower. So, in a way, I kind of see what we're doing here as like we're media gnostics. And I don't think it's a stretch to make that analogy. And I'm doing a deeper dive into the Saturnian symbolism inherent in so many of these movies, the Gnostic stuff. And I'm thinking here, there's a bit of a pattern here that I'm picking up on. But as far as a framework, it makes more sense if you're at all psyop aware. First, Lil Hate says the new Artemis 2 launch date is April Fool's Day. Now, Artemis is the twin of Apollo, and the mission has been plagued by a crack in the hull. So it's like a broken arrow, and she's an archer. So we've been talking about the symbolism of the archer goddess and the broken arrow meaning a nuke. And the first time they tried to launch Artemis, it was during the month when Princess Diana was being commemorated. And Diana, moon goddess, lunar goddesses, 13 lunar months. The number 13 is associated with all of them. And she crashes into the 13th pillar. And I thought, cracked pillar, cracked rocket, broken arrow, archer. Is there a pattern here? At the time, we were talking about Gabby Petito and Marilyn Monroe, Princess Diana, and this spring maiden Persephone, the myth being portrayed on the world stage. So Persephone is Virgo. And the story of Persephone going into the underworld has to do with the transition into fall. So the spring maiden going to the underworld. And we've seen this story of the kidnapped spring maiden taken to Hades played out multiple times ritualistically, like symbolically. And this is, one of the, like we talk about the mysteries, like Freemasonry, uh, King Solomon's architect dies protecting the secrets and he's resurrected. Like this recurring myth that we see in many movies. While this Persephone myth is part of the mystery schools, it's one of their main rituals. And to see it portrayed in events like Gabby Petito, Princess Diana, like dying in the tunnel, uh, but also in so many movies that incorporate themes of like Alice in Wonderland, Dorothy. It's pretty common, very prevalent. I've seen some fascinating examples of this playing out where, like, for example, Westworld, you have Dolores. And so Dolores is like Dorothy, Dolores. You even see her with the same blue dress. So Dorothy, Wizard of Oz, Dolores in Westworld. Man in Black, the man in black with the knife is the Saturnian character, the Hades character. the one that has her imprisoned, and then she has to overcome the cycles to escape. Well, the actress in Westworld who plays Dolores, who's being oppressed by the man in black who threatens to kill her dad, she put out a documentary about her relationship with Marilyn Manson, who, the archetype is very similar to this man in black, and the Saturnian stuff is certainly there. And she put out a documentary about their relationship. And she said that when she met him, it was at a party. She was looking over a balcony, and he said to her, "Don't fall." And then afterward, he invited her to collaborate on a script called Alice in Wonderland. So right there, I'm thinking, wait a minute, don't fall. Persephone falls into the underworld. The idea of Alice falling down the rabbit hole, Alice in Wonderland, Persephone, Man in Black, Hades. These elements are all there in her recounting of their relationship. And in this documentary, she says at one point he had even threatened to kill her dad. I'm like, that's weird, because the way she's describing her relationship as being imprisoned by this person, as being caught in a cycle of abuse, and then having to escape, very much mirrors the Westworld relationship with the man in black in multiple ways, which makes me think that her entire drama was fabricated, some kind of bizarre PR stunt. And then I found more, and it had to do with a song that a couple of music videos that involved her, but a song that he put out where he says that um, and the song is called something, it's a really bizarre word, like over the under something. But anyway, in the song, he says the rape of Persephone was a marketing scheme. So he talks about this hoax of, Persephone, but it ties in to this idea that maybe this was some elaborate PR stunt, sort of like Amber Hill and Johnny Depp. Was that real, or some kind of elaborate PR stunt? So I kind of question if her story was real, or if that Alice in Wonderland script might have pertained to this, but it's really hard to say, where the PR stunt begins and the reality, ends. But the fact that the Westworld storyline mirrored her recounting of that relationship in so many ways was kind of a hoax indicator to me. Yeah, and then she passes the Phoenix Law, which has to do with statute of limitations, resurrecting old cases. And then his ex before that was Rose McGowan, who started the Me Too movement. So the Phoenix Law, or the Phoenix Act, and Me Too are analogous movements. And they're both started by somebody directly connected to him. So looking at it from that perspective, and then his previous associations with psyops, such as the Littleton, Colorado thing, it seems to me very scripted. But the recurring theme of Alice in Wonderland and Persephone encoded into media is just a parallel to like the Truman and the Truman Show. So you have the Gnostic myth of the guy caught in a simulation. You have the other version, Alice or Persephone, in the underworld, and they each have a boss, like Neo versus the Architect, Truman versus Kristoff, Alice versus Mad Hatter, Dorothy versus the Wizard of Oz. You see, there's this consistent dynamic here between the mind controller and the mind controlled, or the creator enslaver and the imprisoned soul spark attempting to liberate. And throughout Westworld, there is a ton of 311 stuff, a lot of pandemic stuff, a ton of concurrent programming. So when we look at these movies and these directors, it's important to keep in mind that the same directors that created content that coincided with the lockdowns have been creating content foreshadowing fallout and nukes. So if you want to know what's going on, in what's to come, look at the metascriptors. Like, we know who the metascriptors are, in large part, the main ones. So if you want to know what is being foreshadowed, what is being primed in the mass mind, what are we being... So the limiting factor as to what they can make happen in the world is the credulity of the news consumers. And right now, they're ready to believe anything. I really want to watch Childhood's End because it's Arthur C. Clarke who wrote 2001 Space Odyssey, where originally they went to Saturn, not Jupiter. But anyway, it has this theme of these aliens coming back to Earth, and they look like demons. Because at this point, they could introduce demons and aliens, and people would probably believe it. They're just about there. But everything they do is, from my point of view, disappointing. I'm always underwhelmed by their performances. And I notice there's a tendency of people who call out media fakery to say, yeah, it's obviously fake. And you know what? I agree with them. I really do. When you say, yeah, that obviously looked fake. The Trump earwig looked fake. Like, yeah, I get it. Your intuition is correct. So I'm not trying to contradict their intuition because they can sense it. They know it's fake. There's a gestalt. There might be 1,000 little minor details that inform them that it's fake and it just doesn't match reality. However, uh, when we're discussing these things, we have to keep in mind the credulity of the public, and to them, it doesn't look fake. So we have to go outside of relying upon, quote, obvious things that we can point out on the screen and get into the deconstruction aspect of it. What is the context in which the event happens? And again, to those who still think that we're pointing out coincidences, explain why every single psyop has a split down the middle, left right interpretation, and it's followed by a ready to implement political agenda. And I'm not even trying to push back anymore against the people who go with the mainstream view that we're just talking about coincidences, because what we're doing here is snowballing. It's inevitable at this point. We've passed the point of inevitability, which means that not only are we right, but we're invading. The off world stage is invading their space. They can't stop this. And by the time we're fully operational, the juggernaut's awake, the Crack Gwyn rises from the ocean. By the time we really start hitting this thing, uh, you know, set the world stage into this state of panic in certain key areas, when we reach critical raft, they're going to have a lot of catching up to do. So leave them in the dark. The people who are refusing to acknowledge the validity of what we're describing, who are continuing to cling to the old paradigm and the old operating system, leave them. I mean, who really cares? We don't need them. They're actually serving the other side. This is revealing. This is a time of great revelation. Because when the paradigm shifts to accommodate a third perspective on media outside their duopoly, grudgingly, obviously, but when this reaches a certain size to where they can't really control it, there's going to be a point, there's going to be a reckoning where a lot of these people who are cowards and sellouts are just not going to, they're not going to be looked at as very credible or reliable. I mean, what are the incentives for upholding these old operating systems that keep people locked in their duopoly? Ignorance is an excuse right now. We can give it to them for a little while. Like, oh, I didn't know. I didn't know the government controlled entertainment as basically a subset of government. I didn't know the psychological warfare was timed with the movies and political agendas. Like, okay, ignorance was an excuse up until like really 2022 when we called out concurrent programming. That's the big paradigm shifter. If you really get down to concurrent programming and ask 10 or 15 follow-up questions, if true, then what? I mean, it does in fact unravel the whole thing. But since then, there's been a lot of thinking and a lot of development. And now it's pretty much the case that we have what we need. We've demonstrated that this is a model, that it's systemic, that it's not going to change. And that's another thing that works to our advantage. It's not going to change. At no point are they going to become honest. There's a creepy car with no lights on circling around. At no point is the media going to become honest and stop doing psyops. They rest upon a history of fakery. That's their foundation. And this is their standard operating procedure. So the manufacturing of history isn't something they make up as they go. It's planned decades in advance. So we can identify the script and metascriptors. And that alone just means that basically it's like calling out the emperor that has no clothes. This thing only seems real because all these people believe it, but now we have an effective challenge to it. And the people who are still pretending to go along with or are going along with it are coming from a place, I think, of safety and comfort, conformity, assumed moral and intellectual high ground. Do you remember how they used to use guilt trips to try to bully us? Don't say it's fake. You got to give time for the families to grieve. And there was in Discord, one of the first Q people I ever met. He gets in our chat and he's like, "Yeah, I'm just parked somewhere in this creepy car. I just drove around. It had no lights on. I thought it was strange." So this guy gets in our Discord server and we're talking about Vegas was so fake. We're sharing pictures that demonstrate how the whole thing was some kind of a hoax. And someone gets on the voice chat and he's like, "I just want to offer my condolences to the survivors and the families of the Harvest Festival shooting." And I was like, "What do you mean it was fake?" The problem is the QAnon people were told by Q that it was a deep state attack against Trump. So all the people who were falling for Q got up and left my server. They said, "How dare you? How dare you call this thing a hoax? All these victims." And I can name names. I could name and shame some people. There's one person I used to respect, and she's like, "My gym teacher was killed there." Like people used to attach themselves to psyops all the time. They would slather themselves in theatrical blood. They would cry. Like those paid mourners in North Korea. You have these people like paid mourners. They'd be on their YouTube channels like, "I'm directly affected by this event because somebody that I know is 6 degrees separated from somebody whose dog walker's best friend has a distant cousin who knows somebody who died at that event." And people would fall for it. And I'm like, "No, we got to be irreverent. Let them call us morbid. Let them call us insensitive and someone called me a psychopath over my comments regarding Charlie Kirk. I'm like, "No, you're mind controlled," but I can understand why they would say that from their perspective. But you have to be willing to come off as a psychopath if that's what it takes, because they don't comprehend where we're coming from. So you don't have to take it personally. In fact, they're in a psychosis. They're technically psychopaths. They're adhering to these persistent delusions. Zal says, "Stay aware, please." Yeah. Well, I'm not worried about getting assassinated. Oh, I did have a very troubling dream the other night. I actually saw something in a dream that I painted once. But I do get premonitions at times, and I don't have any sort of pessimism whatsoever. I'm like the most optimistic person I know. Like when I say that this thing is inevitable, that this third branch of media metastasizes, avalanches, becomes problematic, causes the alt media to hemorrhage, reduces their army of disinfo agents to essentially exposed useful stooges who are outside of their depth. I mean, this is going to be a good time. This is a great time to be involved in this conversation, because what we represent fundamentally is an intellectual revolt against being treated like we don't think. We've been relegated to NPC status. We're supposed to just react and respond like we have no critical thinking. We're supposed to be obedient recipients and reactors to state propaganda. You're supposed to be a loosh cow. Just give up your loosh, moo, stampede when they tell you to stampede, but otherwise stay in your pen. And that's where people have been for a long time. And I just don't think that they're ready, because if you don't know the history of the whole flat Earth thing, the reason why it left YouTube, because conspiracy theories stay in their little sections. The reason why flat Earth became a topic is we put it on billboards, and then we got involved with a daredevil who made it go viral. And not only that, but I didn't just buy billboards. I would organize interviews. I would get CBS, ABC. I got the news media involved, and I had them. I was telling all these other content creators, call your local newspaper, have them come to your events. The whole point of it was get outside of YouTube so that the gatekeepers and shills and agents and operatives don't have any reach. And then it became a thing, though, largely because the media wasn't in any way positioned to respond to it. They treated it like a joke, and then it became serious. And then all of a sudden, you had people like was it some basketball player? Yes, celebrity after celebrity just saying the word, but they always kept it within certain boundaries. But it became a way to get traffic, and then it became a big joke and a meme. But the point of it is, you could see how there wasn't this coordinated response to it. They didn't treat it like it was problematic, and then they overreacted to it. And their overreaction was the point, because my thinking was, if there's anything to any of these things, the best way to find out is to get it in front of the most number of people possible, because just because you come across an idea doesn't mean you can solve it. Maybe you need somebody in a better position with more insight to add to it. So, I'm talking about like human intel, crowdsourcing the truth. Well, when auto-hoaxology, when media deconstruction, properly explained, reaches enough people, a lot of curious people with better resources, better insights, additional insights, or different ideas, related ideas, perhaps other insights we've missed, or people who are even close to these industries that are involved directly or indirectly in psychological operations. The more people involved in this, the more clarity we will get. And there's 200 of us now in the Discord server, but it's pure. It's 200 people who don't fall for alt media guardrails. It's 200 people who are psyop aware and who are mind war inoculated and who aren't reactive lemmings. So I think it's important that we have this pure core, because this is what is going to be metastasizing. There's no bitter clingers. We don't have any false flaggers. We don't have any antis in here. Not that it has to remain pure when it blows up, but the core will maintain that purity. We will have the people who are fighting to defend the old paradigm, just open season on them, debate. The truth is going to be self-evident here, especially with the aid of AI. And the best that the opposition has is, because we're not even talking about the conspiracy theorists. The conspiracy theorists are lost. But mainstreamers, the best they can say is those are coincidences. And the premise can be stated in 10 seconds. Our history is being manufactured through psychological operations because government has turned entertainment into a subset of government itself. Bread and circuses. Bread and circuses as government shouldn't be that controversial a notion. But what should be scandalous here is that we can show how all the big movies and the biggest directors are working in the psychological warfare zone against you. Like we're not beneficiaries of this propaganda. We're targets of it. You are a target demographic. And is this propaganda? Like I sometimes I say this is a soft totalitarianism or a benevolent dictatorship. When I say that, I mean, it's better than you being killed. It's better than literal destruction, that the war has just been internalized. But at the same time, putting people in a state of war, fight or flight, artificial scarcity, polarizing populations with extremist political ideologies, demagoguery, fomenting hate and division for the purposes of mass control. Like, you can't really say that's a good thing. Is it necessary? That's the question. I don't know if it's necessary, but I do think you could make the case that we have been conquered by the supreme art of war, as Sun Tzu put it. Defeating, subduing the enemy without fighting. Look what they've done. The truthers have been subdued by the Jeffrey Epstein story, and now they all believe that they have evidence that they are controlled by Israel because the Mossad controlled Epstein and Epstein compromised everybody. So they've accepted it. Do you see them rising up and fighting? Do you see any of the people who are obsessed with Pizzagate and Epstein over the years? Do you see any of them in any way forming militias? Like, if I was a true believer in vampires and reptilians and satanic blood sacrifices of the innocent, taking out people left and right, I would form a mob with torches and pitchforks and I would go after it. Like, I'm not going to sit back passively while demonically possessed reptilian hybrids eat babies in my neighborhood. I'm not going to stand down. But I'm not doing anything because I know it's not true. The people who think it's true aren't doing anything. They've been conquered. They've been subdued. Lean Dion says, I think the system's cruel. It's destroying minds. Well, here's where I think the cruelty comes in. The paradigm itself truncates human consciousness and leaves you at the level of the ego and it being a byproduct of the meat suit. So we're these egotistical apes, right? And that's all we are. And the paradigm we're in reflects that. As above, so below. Like, we are a microcosm. We're essentially an extension of the system they've given us. And it's, in a way, it entails systemic gaslighting. If your intuition, if any kind of perception outside of what your senses provide you is automatically disregarded, then we've been put into a very limited model when it comes to our understanding of the mind. Like, we've preemptively concluded that we know all there is to know about the mind and everything else is just superstition and new age nonsense. So the cruelty here is in how we have been essentially, um, I would say, reduced. Like, the misanthropic religious paradigms that have mortification of the flesh and asceticism is necessary, being penitent because you're a sinful beast. Yeah, to me, that's very hateful. And if you think about guilt and shame and people being manipulated by this slander on us, because I'm something of a humanist, yeah, it's inhumane and it's somewhat cruel. Weaponizing ignorance is cruelty, but also I think the system. It's like Truman was a fool in the Truman Show. He was completely mind controlled. Sure, he was safe and comfortable, but he was also totally ignorant, and his entire life experience was subdued, restricted, limited. So it's like if he never left, he wouldn't have known. Like in the village, if they don't leave the village, they'll never know what they're missing. And that's kind of the cruelty of it. The cruelty of it is that they have no basis for comparison. There's no choice. It's the lack of volition. So would you opt to live in a cult of soulless, agency free, narcissistic, domesticated apes in a meaningless universe, in a world run by satanic pedos? So it's like, yeah, there is this kind of this twisted, nihilistic paradigm that we've been put in. And I think it's funny when people say, I have no agency, there's no free will, I'm just an animal. Because I like animals. You know, I have a zoo pass. I like animals. So if you're just an animal and you think you have no soul and no agency, you're just like a leaf blowing in the wind, like, I'd love to hear about it. I think it's funny. I mean, it's not funny, but it is. I mean, it's the idea that people would acquiesce to what is in fact a cruel, twisted joke on mankind. Because I think that's a big part of it too. I think that there's a power disparity. The light. I mean, what is the Illuminati? What is the symbolism there? The point of the light. It's consciousness, it's awareness, and it's knowledge, but it's being monopolized. It's being gate kept and it's out of sight, out of mind. So the mass. So basically, we're looking at it's like the gods of Olympus, and then down here we're all in the dark, and they're only gods because they have the light. There's nothing special about them. They're just in a superior position because they know more, and they systematically or systemically inculcate darkness, which is ignorance. But I think that beyond the mind control and beyond the political side of it, I think ultimately it comes down to self knowledge, the self being, the soul. Like, what are we? And I think that by reducing that, by giving false explanations, they eliminate the need for curiosity. In fact, if anything, curiosity is punished, impugned. Not to mention, it's compartmentalized in such a way that when you start even talking about this, now you're outside the purview of the establishment's paradigm, and now you're talking religion. Now you're talking spirituality or new age. So it's automatically put on a lower tier. Like, oh, that's a primitive version of what we now understand to be true. But if you look at how superstitious the modern world still is, it's just superstitions dressed up with science fiction. There's no reason to think that what we're saying is any less superstition. Like, no, we're engaging in a little bit of metaphysical speculation, but it's hard to separate the two. Like, what's the difference between mind control and soul control? Is there a difference between soul and mind? But my perspective includes the presupposition that we are not merely evolved apes, but that we are this. In fact, I say the universe is human centric. So I admit that my views do not comport with mainstream science. I think this place is human centric. But I don't trust what the governments say about the world. I don't trust what the religions say. And I think these are synonymous. Like entertainment, subset of government. Religion, subset of government. And one other point here, the idea of consolidating our best ideas, condensing it, making it understandable, and then disseminating it, it's to invite debate and discourse. Like, prove me wrong. Look at whatever I present on any of these topics, challenge our every premise that we raise, but prove to me that concurrent and predictive programming is an intelligently arranged, engineered coincidence. And then demonstrate to me how it doesn't somehow relate to the fake event that it foreshadows or attends, along with the drills and the ready to implement political agenda. Like, I'd be very keen to hear an explanation for all this stuff that somehow rules out intentionality. And again, the best explanations we've had have been A, higher power simulation, or B, it's merely coincidence from a very incredulous, hand waving perspective. Steel man versus straw man. Straw man is you find something hard to believe, so you misrepresent it, you underrepresent it, and you just burn the straw man. Versus the steel man, where you examine all of their facts and you look for flaws in their argument and you melt the steel man. Melting a steel man is a little harder than burning a straw man, but that's what my standard here is. When I confronted the Mandela effect, I wasn't like, oh, that can't be true. You guys are crazy. I don't do ad hominem. I'm not dismissing it without looking at it. I looked at every single Mandela effect claim one by one, and I gave it a lot of thought. I even considered at one point, and I may still do this, I wanted to interview a detective. I was going to go down to the police station and say, hey, can I get someone to help me understand interrogator bias and how memories can be manufactured? Because it's very well understood. But I put a lot of time and effort into deconstructing the Mandela effect. Like, I think that I put the final nail in Nelson Mandela's coffin. But one thing I did change is that I now somewhat defend them in saying that Mandela affected people are not liars. They are simply mislabeling things they imagined when prompted to do so as actual memories, but it's not their fault because the interrogator gaslights them when they ask these questions, gets them to doubt their perceptions, and then they were promised miracles and transcendence. So that's kind of understandable how you could fall into that religion. It's a cult, you could say. They call it ME for short, Mandela effect, which I think is intriguing because the ME, the Mandela effect, is ultimately about solipsism and pure subjectivity. Where in my universe, this is true, but maybe not in your universe. So every one of them is the center of their own universe. It's very me centric. But it appeals to people, I think, who are also looking for hope and they feel betrayed and lied to by the world, so they go too far. Like, one thing I noticed is the people who see the news as fake. It it's like their mind blows. Like, they short circuit. It's like, oh wait, the news is fake. Reality's fake. I see a glitch in the matrix on the movie, and on TV I'm seeing glitches, so reality is glitching. And that's because people have internalized the television or the screen as a sensory apparatus. Like, this is how you see what's going on in the world. So now you're processing that information like you're sensing it. So you see a glitch in it. It's almost natural to think, well, reality's glitching. But the map is not the territory. The model they give you does not correspond to the real thing. And the world stage is a model. What I'm describing when I say world stage is the real world plus what is augmented via mass entertainment, mass media. And I think when you see the world stage, if you understand this as a model with predictive capabilities, once you see it, you would no longer adhere to it. You would naturally want to step outside of it. The only people who are still going with the program, who are still of the world stage, are those who haven't seen it yet. They tell you that when astronauts go far enough from the Earth, they see the Earth as one, mankind as one. They call it the overview effect. And they say they have a cognitive shift where they see the world in a whole new way. And they come back down and they no longer care about borders and governments and skirmishes. They just care about the oneness. They call that the overview effect. And now it's fake, obviously. I mean, maybe there's an overview effect of being told that space is fake, but the whole thing is just a phony. But what we're offering here is real. It is an overview effect. The off-world stage perspective is the overview effect because you can see the world stage. You can see it in all its compartments from the outside. You can see it decompartmentalized. So I'm offering the real overview effect. Let me catch up on your comments. Didn't really have any serious agenda tonight. I'm just trying to stay up as late as I can because starting tomorrow, I have a night shift. I'll begin my stalking. So I'm going to begin my night stalking career on Friday the 13th. So if I can just stay up for a few more hours, I think I'll be perfectly. I'm just resetting my circadian rhythm here. It was so darn easy. I mean, how? I don't know. I don't know. How is it that I'm making twice as much now putting things on shelves than I got for, whip stitching autopsy bodies closed? Like the things I did for money and not a lot of it. It just seems like maybe I've been overworking. Anonymous says Mandela effect channels are the worst. Well, many of them have good intentions. But see, this is the thing about believers. Believers get mad when you challenge their beliefs. I don't. I don't get mad when I'm challenged on anything that I'm saying. Because if I'm wrong, I want to be corrected. If I'm wrong, I want to reverse engineer my mistakes so I don't make the same mistakes. It's like, let's say you're navigating and you make a wrong turn. Do you not want the right directions? Or do you want to stay lost? Like, I'm not one of those uh, too proud to stop and ask for directions. I don't like being lost. And yet, these people who are attached to these beliefs don't want to be told when they're wrong. It's like, look, what I'm offering you here is patches. There's some holes in your immune system. If you believe in this proposition, these are the holes in your system. These are your vulnerabilities. If you fall for this, this is how you got tricked. And when you can identify the different ways they tricked you with logical fallacies, then you are made impervious to these. It's mind war inoculation. It's a real thing. Like you don't want to be conned and fooled and lied to. And what's the difference between somebody lying to you and somebody using fallacious reasoning to get you to accept a proposition that's not true? There's no difference. Do you want to be lie proof? Because to be lie proof is to move from the believer into the knower. Lean Dion says it's much easier to stay on the world stage, especially for entertainers, even though it's worse for the mind, believing so many layers of lies. Comedians can still joke about Trump eating babies. Yeah, you know what? That is very true. And I think about that it gives people something like, people say, how can you be without religion? Don't you need to believe something? You need to believe in something. And I can see why. It's a more entertaining world, that's for sure. But see, what my thinking is this, and this is why they're not attracted to what we're saying. They have these beliefs, and we're taking those away, and we're not giving them anything in return. We're replacing them with questions. So we're saying your beliefs are false. The best I can do is give you some known unknowns. So now we got a bunch of questions. And the problem with that is that, of course, if you're accustomed to having your beliefs served to you, the answers given to you, you've become a follower. You've become a passive recipient. To be a knower is to be a seeker, which is more active. And so if you're habituated to being baby bird, mama bird, chewing up food and spitting it into your beak for you, doing all the work, yeah, you might not like this because you have to be able to tolerate ambiguity and uncertainty. But I guarantee the known unknowns are way more interesting than any of your conspiracy theories. Any of the conspiracy theories we can name are probably not half as interesting as what we don't know yet, but what we know to be these known unknowns. And so here's another element to this. To reach critical raft, to get a large enough body of people involved in this perspective is to increase the likelihood of finding out what these things are. It's like a bigger spotlight. We got the world of darkness. The passive, okay, passive is dark, active is light, like solar, lunar in their symbolic system. And so the idea of the subconscious mind is a passive recipient. And so the people who are in the darkness are, in fact, the passive consumers of media who aren't actively processing and delineating between real and fake. And so this is like a one of the major shifts here. But the more people we have who are of the active mode of media consumption, it's like the light is congregating. So it's like a spotlight. And so what I want to emphasize here is that the bigger the off-world stage perspective becomes, as it is an alternative to alt media, the brighter the light we can shine in these darkened areas. And that's another thing too. When you're a believer, you have all the answers. You know everything, especially if you're a religious person. So you don't have the need to continue to search. False explanations are like cul-de-sacs. I mean, a false explanation gives the impression there's nowhere else to go. So why bother? So you don't have to seek. You have the answers. So it's a place for people who are comfortable. They're complacent, and it's very stagnant. Trutherville is stagnant, like it's a wreck. It's zombies, Mentanol, Q pipes, red pills, Alex Jonestown Kool-Aid. And the places are it's a dump. So it's kind of a cultural shift as well. But the difference between being a believer and a philosopher, philosophy is like is your operating system. So instead of a book of things that you just believe, instead you have an operating system that helps you discern or that you use to discern what is real and what is fake, or what is something that you can claim to know, what is a valid knowledge claim, and what isn't. And so with the Jim Carrey thing, one of the points I was trying to make was simply that we can entertain these different notions, but we can't fool ourselves into thinking it's a reasonable proposition that he was replaced by a clone. That if we're going to make these hypotheticals, we have to stay grounded in reality. And if you aren't weighing clone versus surgery as equally likely propositions, or one of them more likely, if you're just discounting the official explanation, then you've left the realm of a debate, reason, and discourse, and you've become a automatic believer of the alternative side. So the alt media influencers have betrayed all their subscribers, and they need to come to recognize this. And one of my approaches to reaching the people that we're trying to aim for is by going directly to those influencers who are misleading them and sending AI agents to go down the comment sections and lead people to better answers. So the project I'm working on now is that Charlie Kirk video, which will be advertised by an AI agent to people on X and YouTube who've engaged with the idea that he's still alive. Because none of them arrived at the right answer, because they're seeking answers from alternative media influencers who can't give them the right answers because they're blinkered. But they are reachable. And all it takes is one comment, a tap on the shoulder, a link to a video. Hey, here's the explanation. And I think I can reliably bring in a consistent number of people who are self deprogrammed enough to see the big picture. Lean Dion says certainty is the biggest selling point in marketing. Yes, exactly. And I'm not saying I'm offering certainty here. I'm offering clarity, because I'm not going to presume to tell somebody what to believe, but I will explain how I come to arrive at something as being true and why I say some things are not believable. For example, if somebody says the sun is pink, I really believe that. They can't believe that. They can profess to believe it, but you can't give them that. You can't say, okay, well, we're all entitled to our own beliefs. All beliefs are equally valid. No, you can say that's not a valid proposition, and you have no way you can actually substantiate having that as a belief. So it's not a serious claim. And a lot of unserious claims have been getting a pass because the truther demographic doesn't seem to have the operating system to deconstruct these things, to know why it's bullshit, to know why it should be rejected. And I've been engaging for a long time in these conversations, not because I want to prove I'm right, but because I am trying to assert that some things are objectively valid propositions and some things aren't. And we have to be able to delineate. We can't just treat all beliefs and all opinions as equal. All propositions are equal. All points of view are equal. It's not true. Do you think that your point of view is equal to that of what ChatGPT is going to say about the latest events in the world? ChatGPT is going to reflect mainstream sensibilities. So you already know that you're more discerning than ChatGPT. So you have to recognize, okay, well, there's two different points of view. My point of view is inclusive of this. Its point of view is guardrailed. And so when you get down to points of view, then you look at the compartments and you can identify somebody's point of view and their compartment. And from there, you can ascertain what their interpretation will be for every subsequent fake event. It's somewhat depressing in a way to recognize that there's a program and that people are programmable, and that they defend their own programming. See, when I try to talk about programming with people, like one minute we're talking about Trump and the latest outrage, and I'm like, well, let's talk about the fact that these might just be, well, these are, in my opinion, staged historical events, constructed history, and these are actors. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to engage in meta communication as well as metacognition. Like, how do we think? Not just what do we think, but how do we think? How do we communicate rather than just what is being communicated? And when I try to go into the meta of something like Trump or Musk and how the zeitgeist is essentially a construct by government controlled media, prefabricated to go along with the long term agenda that's already been planned out long before most of these actors were even known to us on the world stage. When I try to talk about it from that perspective, they zone out. Like I realize it's really hard to reach people because they're processing everything literally. It's okay. It's like talking to a literalist, a Bible literalist, versus somebody who appreciates some things as metaphor and allegory. Like these are two different mindsets. And if you believe these things are literal and it's a literal history book, and that's your starting point, that's going to affect all of your interpretations and it's going to limit your perspectives. But I have a mind map and a infographic for the compartments that I want to focus on next before I do any more character breakdowns. I'll probably record that one tomorrow. I just got a box of markers, dry erase markers. And what I'm working on with this History's Manufactured series of short videos is I'm just putting a lot of things in sequence that will later be re-recorded, better quality content as part of this. What I'm trying to make, like, maybe a 90-minute breakdown of everything, like in one video that explains everything, and then provides accompanying PDFs or links to our deconstruction project. So then we can put it out there and see who can refute it. A refutation that goes beyond a straw man or dismissal or some kind of appeal to a divine source for everything, some kind of escapist drivel. Like, where are the realists? Where are the objectivists? Well, the objectivists were never objectivists because they always filtered their perceptions through media because they didn't know. I mean, you can forgive people in the past who simply didn't have access to the information that we have. And we've taken a lot of information and like all kinds of weird theories. We've looked at everything very closely. Like, someone once accused me, "Oh, you believe that this person is that person?" I'm like, "No, I don't." We were talking about hyper realistic masks, and we were exploring different conspiracy theories and trying to understand the concepts of fakeability. And you can say it's fakeable, doesn't mean it's fake. Or it's fakeable, but it's not fakeable at scale. So we have to fine tune our language because the words that we would use to describe things have all been co-opted. Even the word psyop has been destroyed. There's so many videos now how to spot a psyop, and it never goes into nobody dies. It never goes into the big picture, and it's always dramatized, sensationalized. But there's just, the issue is perspective. If you don't have the off-world stage perspective, you cannot arrive at the right conclusion regarding any event where it seems like people are dying. I've heard so many interesting variants over the Trump shooting event to explain it, where people are like, yeah, I don't believe he was shot, but I do think those other people died. And there are so many explanations for how the other people died. And like, they can't remove anything. They can't subtract. Why is that? And that's why I say we are MSM minus. This is the subtractive route. Our starting point subtracts from their starting point. Main and alt have the same starting line. It's, they're in a race to tell the story, and they both have the same starting line, which is the story at face value. And I'm like, I'm not starting from their starting point. I'm actually going back and I'm subtracting some things because they're running off of one false premise or another in every instance. And one other thing that we're doing that no other group of media analysts or deconstructionists or hoax and analysts are doing is that we're going backward in time. We're retro auto hoaxing. We're expanding our frame of reference to look at this thing in its totality. Like I talk about the forest of fakery. Yeah, we're looking at this thing as a whole, as a system. These aren't anomalous events. That's why I say systemic fakery. It's built into the architecture of the world stage model. But I think we've laid the groundwork, and things are going to get more interesting as we start taking calls. I'm not going to be consistently having to reiterate things, but there's a purpose to this, and we're moving into the next phase. So it's going to get more interesting. Mark my words. And I do think that the working capital that I'm getting from this night stalking gig is going to finance a lot of things that have really just been backburnered for too long. But I haven't lost interest in any of it. In fact, I kind of recognize that the longer it takes for me to launch some of these projects, the more leverage I'm going to have from AI and improvements in software and other things. So I'm not in this mad dash, but I am consistent. But I'm like, starting it this summer really would be, it's probably better than if I had maybe started it last year. especially when I look at generative AI and even the printers and the templates. Everything has been just incrementally improving. Yeah, good point. Lean Dion says they'll say the elites blood sacrifice celebrities and kids, but think we're insane for suggesting nobody dies in these fake events. Exactly. What is their standpoint to say your propositions are crazier than mine? Like, I'd like that Nick Hinton guy on Twitter to say, I know you're saying that governments are planting subliminals in movies, but I think it's more likely that a quantum computer reached the singularity, became intelligent, and went back in time, and then planted seeds in the movies about future fake events. Like, show me your Occam's razor. That's got to be the dullest razor on earth. If you can't weigh these two propositions as one being more reasonable than the other, and that's people going with their feelings, their presuppositions, the engagement bait and the clicks, the tabloid, which again, that's not serious discourse. I mean, see, when I say this is philosophical, philosophy is about, you like knowledge. These people are destroying knowledge. We're trying to understand our thinking process, metacognition. These people are engaged in cognitive sabotage. Anybody telling you that Jim Carrey's CGI and that Kate Perry never existed and Jeffrey Epstein is just a AI character, anybody selling you that crap is actually selling you, I think, menthol laced red pills. Don't trust those people. And I'm not trying to be rude about it, but how much time do you have in life? How many F's do you have to give? How much spare bandwidth do you have? And do we really need to be super tolerant of people who are obviously not getting with the program, or rather with the deprogram, who are putting their personal bias, their feelings, and their pet theories above documentable facts and receipts? I'll put my receipts above your feelings any day. Because this isn't like about what we want to believe. We're not treating emotions as tools of cognition. This is based on what we can prove so unequivocally that even the AI gives us the right answers and is unable to explain away what we're saying. A good example is I was talking to AI the other day. I was talking to Grok, and I'm like, how many of the people at the Vegas shooting, the Harvest Festival, were shot at again? And at the secondary event, tell me about the drill down the street involving the same exact number of victims as mass casualty actors. And I could just see it struggling, where it's like, yes, this is true, but that's just a coincidence. Yes, this is true, but this just reflects how prevalent gun violence is. Like, I can see AI struggling to defend a belief system. It's pathetic, actually. Ollie Goering says, remember they said stupid things like that stuff about the blood orange juice? Oh yeah, yeah, I know. The satanic panic, the superstition, the insanity. Look, the other night I was looking at these tweets by somebody who I feel like they lost it. They lost their marbles. This person was trying to say that Lynn Ertel is Demi Moore. You know Lynn, freaking caller, truther, red pillar, false flagger. You know, basically your prototypical 9/11 truther, still mad at Bush. Like, you know, essentially an orthodox truther, but otherwise completely normal person. But we have this conspiracy theorist who's friends with Dave J. Her name is, or his name is James, but pretends to be some old woman. I dox this person. Anyway, this person is convinced that Lynn Ertel is Demi Moore. I'm like, okay, that's kind of crazy, because this same person, I think 5 years ago, was coming up with these theories about me, and I forget who they said I was. some kind of Mossad agent, but they also identified me as some celebrity. I don't remember who it was. Yeah, I don't want to say the person's name because I blocked them. But I've been communicating with them with a troll Twitter account and agreeing with them. And they're just like, it's like a cracked vessel. It's like you just spent 6 years of your life tweeting nonsense into the void. And I don't know, it's foolish, it's sad. Is it healthy? I don't know. And it's not just that they believe that Demi Moore calls into Infinite Plane Radio. I mean, that's weird enough. But they're weirdly insistent that I'm an imposter or they've replaced me and that I'm a different person than I was last year. Like I've been phased out and replaced. So like I kind of feel like what Jim Carrey's feeling right now. The Illuminati got mad at me and they sacrificed me. And then she's friends with Dave J, who I kicked out. Do you know why I like Dave J in a way? I mean, even though I don't, but I mean, I don't hate him. I just think he's uh, a rude troll, and he's kind of antisocial, personality disorder. But that's fine. But I kicked him out not because of that, because I accept him. I kicked him out because he kept trying to sell me on the idea that chemtrails are actually the trails left by demons and angels fighting in the sky to plug up holes or portals to some other realm or something. And I'm like, these people are just marinating in their own insanity and nobody's stopping them. Like, I feel like, you hear about these stories about, people having like kidnap people in their sheds, like that movie Room. Oh, there's another Gnostic movie, Room. Like, you just want to rescue these people, is what I'm saying. Like, take them outside, make them run through a park and touch grass. I don't know. It's probably too late. So another Gnostic movie is Room. And Room is about a true story, kind of, but it's about this woman who was kidnapped and put in a shed, a single room. And she had a baby with her captor. And it was basically her and this child. And when he turns 5, she tells him, "Hey, I'm going to break you out of here and you're going to see the outside world." And all he knew of the world was what he saw on TV. And he had never been outside of it. So he said, "There's nothing outside of the walls." And she's trying to explain to him that Nick, she called him, which, Nick, for some reason, I think the main character, the main character is describing the kidnapper as this guy named Nick. And I think Nick represents the demiurge or some kind of, as you'll see. But the whole movie, the first half of the movie, they're in this room and he's watching TV. She's raising him, and then she's trying to break the news to him that we've been trapped in here, and I'm going to break you out. And he's like screaming at his mom, and he's saying, "There is nothing outside of this room. You're lying to me." And she says, "No, I am unlying because I was lying the whole time." And this is exactly what I mean when I say that the programming is by default. You're already programmed. You have to deprogram. You have to unlie because you've already internalized the lying. But the way she breaks him out is she tells him that you're going to play dead. I'm going to roll you up on the carpet, and then Nick's going to go dump you somewhere. And then she describes to him this way that he'll know the right street to unroll from the blanket and jump out. And so the first half of the movie, the room that they're in looks pretty big. And from the perspective of like, the child and looking up, and it's just this big room. And then he escapes and he sees the world and he kind of like, he's overwhelmed by it. And then he and his mom go back and they visit the shed and it's suddenly very tiny. And there's just kind of this interesting concept of his frame of reference and how the mind will like grow to the size of the container it's put within. Like Truman was a reflection of the Truman Show, a microcosm. And when he left it, obviously his worldview expanded. In the village, when they leave the village and they find out, oh, there's a 20th century out here, we don't have to stay in the woods with our creepy elders. Their worldview, suddenly expands to encompass all the stuff that was out of their frame of reference. So they didn't even know what they were missing. So there's this ignorance of not knowing what they're missing, accepting false explanations and accepting the limitations, and then feeling content within that small container. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing with belief systems with regard to conspiracy theorists and truthers who are contented with their beliefs and they don't want to go into the unknown, when the unknown might be way better than the lies they've accepted. And to me, that's really the premise behind, like when I say Gnostic, I say it with a lowercase g, that what seeking and knowledge can provide to me is likely bigger than any of the beliefs, which, as we can tell, belief systems have generally been put there to constrain us. So if they're still chasing shiny new objects, entertainment, infotainment, comfortable orthodoxies, they're doing so because they fear the unknown, or they don't have the imagination or the um, frame of reference to understand that they've been sold a false paradigm as a diversion from something. And they wouldn't be hiding you from something if it wasn't better. They wouldn't be concealing it if it wasn't worth concealing, just judging by their own psychopathology. So I use the term monolith, but I think it implies monopoly. And of course, monopoly refers to really the opposite of free market. Monopoly is different from a um, you have like force behind it. So it's not like they can enforce it. Whereas, you can't monopolize something if you don't have the force to actually control it. You go through your comments. Anonymous says, well, got to give him a C for creativity. What's up, Waco Soto? Thanks for joining. So it's Thursday night, March 12th. Yesterday was a very important anniversary. The 311 thing. Oh, by the way, so 311, World War III started, Ground Zero, Seattle, as we predicted. And what happened on that following Friday? It was a Friday the 13th that Trump declared it a state of national emergency. And that following Monday, the 16th, was a Black Monday market crash. And I think the Dow Jones fell down almost 3,000 points, which is kind of 9/11-y. But here's some interesting meta script and programming, concurrent programming, before we had that term. On 3/16/2020, a show called Black Monday premiered its second season. And the first season was about the 1987 Black Monday market crash, which was 33 years prior. So you have another Black Monday 33 years after the first one. And the TV show about the first Black Monday had its second season premiering on the second Black Monday, the 2021. One of the actresses actually commented on the eerie coincidence. But again, it was 3/11, pandemic declared, Friday the 13th, national emergency, and then a Black Monday market crash the following Monday, coinciding with Black Monday season 2, going along with our second Black Monday, 33 years apart. When we do a breakdown of the Burning Man stuff, which we've done extensively, you'll see how we've arrived at certain conclusions about the meanings of certain numbers. So the first Burning Man festival was 1986, and then 2019 was the last one before they had a pause for COVID. At the last one in 2019, a 33-year-old died. So it's the 33rd Burning Man, a 33-year-old dies, and they're in Black Rock City, Nevada. So we were noticing a correlation between Black Rock and the Burning Man and the number 33. Like, how many miles in circumference is the Black Rock at the center of the North Pole, according to Mercator and John D? Oh, yeah, 33 miles. So this 33 associating with the Burning Man is a whole symbol complex worth getting into, I think. And it ties into the phoenix, which is a Christ symbol. It ties into Kundalini, the fire snake, ascension of consciousness, 33 vertebrae. So it's all tied into this idea of resurrection and transcendence. But the 33 ascension, transcendence, and 42 is consistently associated with Saturn, the material realm, descent, and death. So like life, death, light, dark, ascent, descent, as well as gravity, the pull down, or falling as the opposite of ascending. So like descent into matter. And I think there's quite a lot of significance built into like the cube, the Kaaba, the big cube, and its association with a meteor. Because a meteorite, you see like a light in the sky, so it's like a star, it's light, and it's above. But then it comes down to Earth, and it's a rock, like a black rock, the cube. So you have this idea of light descending into matter. So again, light, ascent, matter when it falls, 33 and 42 have been associated with this 33, Mach 33 escape velocity from the material realm. And of course, Musk has inculcated the number 42 into everything SpaceX does. And Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy describes the number 42 as the meaning of the universe, and it's said so by deep thought, which is a massive computer at the center of the universe. And again, deep thought, D is 4, T is 20. So there's a lot of 420, 42s. Even with the rockets, Musk had the 33 Raptor engines, and then they added 9, making it 42. And if you remember, it was a Starship with 42 engines and had a 42 on the side of it on one of the jets, on one of these rocket engines, and it spectacularly crashed and exploded on is it Groundhog's Day a few years ago. We need to go back. I'm going to do another iteration of Cult of the Obelisk, because when you start seeing the ritual significance of the space program, of NASAtology, it's a whole other area of the metascript, because we have the story of what's going down on the ground and history, but there's this whole other area up above. And if you're challenged by the idea of history being manufactured, but you're at least aware that space is fake or space travel's fake, well, then what do you think's going on with the space program? They're playing out a script. How far in advance is it written? Well, that's a good question. But you can look at the relationship between science fiction and things becoming, quote, real. Why are all the old great science fiction authors prophets? There's this relationship between science fiction and our modern space program where it's like there's a point where science ends and science fiction enters the equation. And the science fiction part is mythology. But these are mythologies that are grafted into our consensus worldview and accepted as real. Again, where's the pushback? Where are the philosophical organizations, the thinkers, the intellectuals pushing back against this rising trend of superstition and religious fundamentalism. Because, like, I talk about the idea of a soul and immortality or life being beyond and human centricity, but I'm not referencing superstition or belief or religion. I'm just proposing a theoretical model. And I am open to the model being refuted, challenged, altered by additional information. But I recognize it as a theoretical model. Nobody looks at the Bible as, oh, it's theoretically true. I'm going to go to church and, it's a good hypothetical possibility. No, people go to profess their faith and belief despite the lack of evidence, which they're told is a virtue. Because it's a virtue to not need evidence to believe something, right? Apparently, in some certain areas, like, for example, mainstream media, you're virtuous if you trust the mainstream media, but you're corrupt and immoral and cruel if you follow conspiracy theories. All right, so we'll be likely live, open phones in an office space in a few weeks. But for the most part, we're going to be doing these live streams earlier in the evenings because of my new schedule. I think 6 p.m. is great. That's when I'm on with Fakeologist, like 6 to 8 or 6 to 9, possibly. I can maintain that. It's not even full time, it's like 4 shifts a week. So it's not even an encroachment on anything that I'm doing anyway. In fact, it's very productive. The way that it's structured, I have a 90 minutes every shift to keep up in Discord and to work on other projects. So I'm just taking advantage of the opportunity to finally get some steady working capital injected into all these latent projects that have been sitting back. But I kind of figured this out a while ago that the main thing to invest in right now is the intellectual foundation of this off world stage perspective, this new platform. And that when the time comes, everything's going to resurrect at once. The press club, the tabloid, the cards, the books, that we've done this before, but I figured it was better to just sacrifice quantity for quality, purity being our focus, and quarantining until we can get everything established. Because what we didn't want to do is open up to operatives, agents, content thieves. Content thieves won't touch what we do. The content thieves will take other people's connections and observations and brand it as their own and share it all the time. In fact, remember Stu Peters took that video that I did at the city council talking about the ISS? They'll share your content, but they'll never direct their audience to you. That's what I mean by content thieves. They're hijacking, they're pirates. They are not capable of pirating what we're doing here. The off world stage perspective concept undermines their entire platform. They can't go here. So it's kind of, that's why I think this thing is so interesting. And this is a unique proposition and an interesting philosophical movement to be a part of. Because as this thing expands, avalanches, metastasizes, invades their spaces, they don't have any recourse. They don't have any refutation. It's just like we're blindsiding them, and it's too late. They're married to their paradigm. They're mired in their muck. They're clinging to their guardrails. They're defending their programming. And the people who should be taking this seriously aren't, because they become complacent and lazy and they're not willing to look at it. And I'm like, I literally don't care. I'm not seeking their approval. I don't want to breathe their air. I don't want to curry their favor. I don't want to be on their podcasts. We're here specifically to damage the world stage architecture, so they have to try to fix it and recover. And the real action is in the enemy's reaction. I think that's Alinsky. So what we're doing is we are forcing them to react, and it's comical. It's comical because they cannot address the elephant in the room, mass media fakery. And they can't let the smarter people out there, the deep thinkers, they can't let any serious journalists consider the proposition that they're part of an institution that has been for generations manufacturing a false worldview. This is a massive collective betrayal of all mankind. And I think it's just maybe a little much for them. But truth doesn't care about their feelings. And the think tank has always been a tank for a reason, because they're waging mind war on us. You think we're just targets? We're just taking it like, yeah, let them gaslight us, warp our perception of the world, mind control our friends and families, program us with impunity, treat us like we're NPCs with no free will. No, of course not. The idea of the tank isn't anything. It's not like it's not like we're threatening in any real sense, but in the arena of ideas, we're hitting back. So, like when I say set the world stage on fire, that's what the Insider is about. The tabloid. The tabloid's a reference. The Insider is a reference to Ignatius Loyola. Ignatius, ignite. So, insight, like insight, or inside, an insider, an inciter. These words are very intriguing to me because we're talking about insiders who have certain insights. But these insights, if set out into the world stage, might incite a certain response. And what Loyola said was, go forth and set the world on fire. And what he meant was the Holy Spirit, prayer, religiosity, spread their religion with fervor. And what I'm saying is set the world stage on fire like a pyromaniac. Not pyro, but pyro, the progenitor of skepticism. And by setting the world on fire, we're talking about light, knowledge, consciousness, hot skulls. If you ever see my penguins with the burning heads, it's a reference to Hot Skulls, a movie about a government shutting everything down because of mind viruses that you could catch by hearing them. So everybody was mandated to wear earplugs. And the guy in the movie, the main character, who wasn't wearing earplugs, was listening to all the mind viruses. And they were studying him because the more mind viruses he listened to, the hotter he showed up on their detection. They had this, like, I guess it was like a camera that would show infrared, but he would show up because the hot skull. But it's just a metaphor. He had too much light, too much knowledge, like Prometheus. He's a threat to the establishment in that he could potentially light up civilization. So I just look at this thing as, in a way, a a challenge to the prevailing darkness, to the weaponized ignorance, to the hoodwink. The Black Mirror is a hoodwink for the modern era. It's the Overton window, but it's also opaque. It's a frame of reference designed to conform you to a prefabricated model, not to inform you about the real world. So this is really just a pushback against the ignorance. And again, by intellectual revolt, I mean, like, if you're not mad at this, then you're not paying attention. Like, it's like at the very minimum, you should be insulted. I'm not saying get mad and march, but I'm saying, like, at least be insulted enough to recognize that you ought to take pleasure in making them look foolish. And that's what I'm looking forward to. Making the operatives, the agents, the useful stooges look foolish because we've gone outside of their purview, above their experience level, above their pay grade, above their security clearance. By insiders, I mean, we have accessed a strata of information that only the programmers are supposed to have. And we've taken this information, we've taken this stolen fire from Olympus, and we've begun cultivating it, and now we're just going to use it to light up the darkness. So burning the world stage is really just saying they've got belief systems that need to be confronted with knowledge and exposed for what they are, lies. And I'm comfortable letting people marinate in their ignorance and lies, and what it's not my business. But the whole point of this is that for at least a period of time, there needs to be pushback just to get the reaction. And the reaction, in my view, will be the establishment of a third branch of media, a self aware demographic that they can't stamp out, that exists independent of their duopoly. And even if they continue to ignore it, it still continues to be a force. And by force, I mean a player, an entity to contend with, and a constant reminder that they're all liars, deceived, and participating in mass deception. Like they should be embarrassed. Every metascriptor should be embarrassed because they're taking pride in mass deception and their legacy being part of this manufacturing of this version of history that we're all given. Because I know it's a point of pride. I guarantee that the meta scripters, the writers, the authors, those who are tapped on the shoulder by someone from the design authority, some stranger, some man in black, someone from the Central World News Services, like in Newsbenders, hey, you're not one of them. You're not one of the NPCs. You're one of us. Like, I don't know how they go about doing this. Like, I was talking to someone about this the other day. I was like, I don't think that you need to blackmail people to get them to keep secrets, to collaborate and compromise themselves, their companies, their governments. I don't think you need to blackmail people. I think you need to engage in common criminality. In other words, you give them the privilege of being above the law. And I think that is what binds them. Power hungry, um, lust for power. They're power hungry. That's the thing. They're not afraid of getting caught. They're addicted to being above the law. They're addicted to being able to have the privilege of not being bound by the same rules and laws as everybody else. Common criminality. And I'm saying that we're looking at common criminality. I mean, if you want to say it's, I mean, maybe it's art crime. We could say it's an art crime. You know, you have the budget, the big studios, the talent to create these, these great works of art, which they are, because I'm a big fan of movies and film and literature and everything. However, it has an ulterior purpose, which is serving the state church. And the state church is putting people into an endarkenment. So again, they don't have the moral high ground in this. It's nothing benevolent in that sense. It's very nefarious. In other words, we're talking about like this army of darkness, like quite literally. Their objective is let's pull the wool over the minds of mankind, and let's blind their third eye, eliminate intuition, reduce them to the ego, encourage narcissism in favor of true self-knowledge. Let's make them in love with this false self, and then convince them that they're just meat sacks. Like, I don't know. To me, that's something to be a little perturbed about. Like, I don't have any sort of like resentment, anger, rage in that sense. When I say again intellectual revolt, it's in the arena of ideas. And I'm doing this because it's funny. It's funny, it's entertaining, it needs to happen, and we should want to see the purveyors of mass deception humiliated, just on principle. I mean, think about these operatives, these influencers who don't even know what they're a part of. And how are they going to be when they've signed the contract? They've signed their names in blood. They are owned. They're just propaganda vectors, they're vessels. They serve the archonic forces of darkness, and then they're going to find out the truth along with everybody else, and they're going to still be forced to defend the lies. So the term truther is going to be exposed to be a huge fraud, a misnomer. The biggest misnomer of all is the word truther, because trutherism is a fraud. It's a big hoax. It's a deeper level of deception. It's like, we're woke. You're not woke. You're having a nightmare. You didn't awaken. Like, I'm so awake. Alex Jones woke me up. Richie from Boston woke me up. David Weiss woke me up. Like, no, they didn't wake you up. They got you really high. They got you addicted to, red pill, shocking truths, essentially conspira porn, fear porn. That's not awake. It's a deeper level of programming because the regular stuff wasn't doing it for you. I think it's interesting to watch, though. Like I said, I'm an anthropologist in this. I like to see how mainstreamers contend with conspiracy theories. It's almost like a guilty pleasure. They laugh about it, but then they just relapse right back into their programming. But again, believer, knower, follower, seeker. When you really break it down, it all makes sense. And I don't think I don't think that being a knower, a Gnostic, being informed means that you're a better person necessarily. But you can say without any sort of guilt about it that, yeah, you have a better operating system. I don't fall for these lies. I don't get triggered by what's in the TV. MK Ultra doesn't work on me. Like, you can't say that's not a better operating system than the auto believers. Like, imagine thinking that your gullibility and your willingness to believe and react is somehow virtuous. No, it's actually it's a travesty. But people are always also, I think, more or less beholden to the mob, the group, the consensus. And one of the commonalities that we've talked about recently with all these various religions and these myths is that they all have this outsider that they have to condemn. Like the suppressive person, the sinner, the heretic, the infidel, the apostate, the conspiracy theorist. And then you have these corresponding myths of the rebels who go against the divine order, and they're always the bad guys. Lean Dion says it seems that Epstein stuff is a mass public normie initiation into deeper conspiraporn. Yeah, I think so. I absolutely think so. Um, like, what they have done is they have reinforced the the structure of the political horseshoe structure between Renee Good and the Epstein files. You have the far left and the far right absolutely vindicated. This is worldview reinforcement. So if you were a leftist, Antifa leaning leftist, you definitely saw the ICE versus the Twin Cities and Renee Good. You saw that as evidence that you're on the winning team. You're on the right side of history. Like, I'm righteous. I'm on the right side of history. I'm against those bad guys. That's proof right there that the American government is systemically racist and oppressive, and I need to put aside my privilege and fight for those people that the Wizard of Oz wants to deport. So their critical race theory worldview was vindicated, validated, demonstrated to be true and worthy as a cause. Worldview confirmed. The other guys are bad, we're good. Polarity reinforced. The schism is deeper. And on the other side, the Epstein stuff is like, hey, we're right, guys. Trump's in on it. The world's under the control of Israel. The Mossad controlled Epstein. And everybody that we thought was great, all the celebrities and politicians, yep, they're all blackmailed. It's the J pill, man. Critical Israel theory. It's right. So critical race theory versus critical Israel theory, far left, far right. And there are moderate opinions in each of these factions. There's the mainstream Republicans who are anti-Islam, pro-Israel, and then there's leftists who are not Antifa, but their essential world view, however, even if they're not woke to it or they are, see, this is their worldview. It's just a matter of, are they woke to it? Are they aware of the oppression? Have they been appraised of it? So if you're left, you're part of a paradigm in which systemic racism and whiteness is the oppressor of the world. But you don't really know it or recognize it or talk about it unless you're, quote, woke. On the right, you do have this essential paradigm that the world's under the control of these shadowy cabal of bankers over here and that we're being puppeteered. That is part of that paradigm, but only the woke fringe openly says it. And then the mainstream Republicans don't say it because they are ostensibly under the control of it. You see, it's a set of compartments where you've got these two major compartments and subsets, but it's actually that basic. And all the psyops do is they reinforce the sides and they reinforce the structure itself. And every incoming fake event is split down the middle. Again, it's like every one of them is a Hegelian dialectic. Both sides agree it happened. Left says right caused it, right says that left caused it, whatever the event is. That's actually a major hoax indicator, and I think it's auto hoaxer Axiom 47. If the PSYOP has a bifurcated response that tracks with the political horseshoe, it's fake. Because reality is not like that. Do you remember how the left was so happy about Luigi Mangione killing that CEO? And I was like, wow, they were really happy that this guy got killed because he was a CEO. And then whenever I see like deaths on the news and people dying, like a plane crashes or something, or I'm like, why aren't they waiting? Why are they calling it a tragedy? Shouldn't they make sure that that wasn't like a plane full of CEOs first? Like there's a shooting at a hockey rink, and they're reacting to it. Oh, it's guns, it's right wing hatred. Well, how do you know the victims weren't CEOs? Why don't you wait until they've notified the next of kin, death certificates come out, we find out where they worked? Because maybe they worked for United Healthcare. Maybe the shooter was a hero. I mean, just by their logic. And one other point, and this is actually something that I think is something worth chastising them over. The people who react to these fake events think that they're real, generally speaking. So their reactions are an authentic expression of who they are. So the people who cheered for the death of Charlie Kirk are genuinely nasty people, even though the actor who played Charlie Kirk is a genuinely nasty person, a wolf in sheep's clothing, a liar, and a deceiver. It's kind of funny how Erica Kirk's like the bad one and Charlie's all innocent. It's like, no, Charlie Kirk is the devil. A guy was evil in every sense of the word. An evil deceiver, an operative, misleading the multitudes, lying to the youth, engaging in psychological warfare, pretending to be a good guy, faking his death to traumatize an entire generation of youth Christian Republicans. No, the guy is essentially a terrorist. Charlie Kirk is a mind war operative who conducted, I mean, he was the subject of it, but that was an act of terrorism, the assassination, the gore, the blood gushing out. Like he was down with that. He was part of that. He's the star of that. So it's just kind of ironic that people are like, Erica's so bad and Charlie was so good. It's like, what do you mean? They're both cackling evil witches behind the scenes. I mean, what do you call that? And it reveals a total lack of discernment by the followers of these puppets. But anyway, Bread in circuses is government. Government is bread in circuses. This is an ancient system. It's not going to change. And we're the only ones who are consolidating around a framework with which we can actually confront it and force some kind of a reaction. And I say it's inevitable. There is going to be a reaction. The invasion from the off-world stage isn't going to be unnoticed. And you may not see the big picture yet. I'll be happy to um, explain what we're going to do with this as we go forward. But for the time being, the main focus for me is let's consolidate our best research in a way that we can present it to the most number of people and let them try to deal with it. It's like, this is your problem. This is your belief system. You have to reconcile with this. We've already figured it out. We've already decided that we're not in your little internalized Truman Show designed to turn us into NPCs. Get with the deprogram. All right, thanks for the comments. We'll be live tomorrow, then Infinite Plane Saturday, and we'll go from there. I can't wait to reintegrate the press club. It's another thing I'm looking forward to by the summer. But again, the next thing though, my focus is PSYOP trading cards first, and then we'll get into the tabloid. And someone suggested a PSYOP trading card to me, so appreciate all the ideas. And if you have designs, send them. We are going to be putting I think number 24 to 36 out next. Somebody actually ordered a painting from me. I'm painting Jim Carrey, putting on a Jim Carrey mask. It's a painting of one of the PSYOP cards that we actually had Jim Carrey in a Biden mask. So it's sort of pertinent right now.